Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku and Shigaraki Shared a Quirk? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Don't turn around, Inko. What? Hisashi squeezed her tighter. I said don't turn around. 12-year-old Inko forced her way out of Hisashi's grip and turned towards the TV. What are you talking about, Hisa? Inko froze. On the screen was a news report on a recently deceased hero. This, unfortunately, wasn't out of the ordinary in hero society, but that wasn't what caught her attention. What caught her attention was the name of the deceased hero. Her mother was dead. Hisashi cursed and turned off the television in front of them, before grabbing her and pulling her into a hug. The kind woman who cared for everyone, and whom she had only met a few times, was dead. She distantly heard Hisashi calling her name, but she just ignored him. Her mother was dead. Inko's mind repeated this, but she still couldn't process it. Tears poured down Inko's eyes. Her mother was dead. Inko! 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 30-year-old Inko awoke to tears in her eyes and her husband shaking her. She drowsily sat up on the couch and noticed the clock. It was just past midnight, meaning she'd only been asleep for 2 hours. She shifted her eyes to her husband and fully processed that he was there. Immediately, she latched onto his larger frame and hugged him with all her might. I see that you're happy to see me. Hisashi forced out with a grunt of pain. Inko immediately let go of him. Sorry, it's just been so long since I last saw you. Hisashi's expression slowly morphed into a sheet-eating grin. You know it's fine to be rough with me, let's just make sure Izuku is asleep before we get started. I can get the whip if you want. Inko slapped him upside the head, blushing furiously. You incorrigible horn dog. Hisashi let out a hiss and gave her a slight glare. You demon harpy, you almost ripped off my scalp. Inko, still blushing furiously, replied back with a scream. I'll show you a harpy. Inko pushed Hisashi onto the couch before playfully beating on his chest with her fists. Hisashi laughed and responded in an overdramatic voice. I give in, you're just my harpy. Inko beat his chest one more time playfully, before she laid down next to him on the couch. She snuggled up against him and laid her head on his chest, still blushing a moderate amount. I'm so happy you're home. Hisashi lowered his hand and stroked her head. Besides, do you think I would just skip out on my only child's 4th birthday? You missed his 3rd one. Hisashi winced. Oh come on, you and I both know that my flight got delayed due to that villain attack at the airport. Inko gave him an annoyed look before laying her head back on his chest. They sat in silence for a few minutes before Hisashi broke the tension with a question. Do you want to talk about it? I don't know. Was it the one where you watched her die again? Inko looked up in surprise towards Hisashi, who now had a half-hearted smile plastered on his face. You always cry when you have that dream. Inko looked down with a small tremble. You know me too well. Hisashi stroked her hair for a minute. I never really understood why you cared so much about someone who abandoned you and separated you from your brother. Inko considered his words before responding. I've pondered it myself multiple times, and I guess the best answer I can give is that she was my mother, no matter what she did to us. Inko clenched his leg fearfully. Besides, no one deserves to die to that thing. Hisashi looked thoughtful for a moment. Have you started training Izuku yet? Inko shook her head. No, he's way too young for that. I plan on starting when he's about he needs to be fit enough to defend himself if that monster ever figures out who he is. Hisashi let out a sigh before leaning back. You should go to sleep, we have to get up bright and early to check if our little Izuku got his quirk yet. Inko let out a yawn of acknowledgement before drifting off on her husband's lap. Izuku woke up to find his hands had gone clean through the bed. That was odd. The little 4-year-old pushed his hands against the ground, trying to push himself up. The instant he did, however, his hands went straight through the floor. Izuku panicked and started screaming. Almost inhumanly quickly his mother and father, when did Daddy get home? Smashed open his bedroom door in battle-ready stances. They looked around quickly for an intruder before seeing the predicament their son was in. Inko, being the one closer to Izuku, pulled her son off the bed, while Hisashi continued scanning the room for anything out of the ordinary. They both looked extremely tense, eyes darting around the room near constantly. As Izuku sat in his mother's grip, he let his body relax and leaned into her. He reached up with his left hand and tightly squeezed his mother's hand with his own. He stopped squeezing when his mother screamed out in pain and let go of him. He whipped around to see what was wrong and froze at the graphic sight before him. The top layer of skin on his mother's hand was completely gone, exposing the muscle beneath. Blood seeped from the wound and immense pain was etched on her face. His father quickly grabbed his mother's arm and examined the skinless patch on her hand. His worried face slowly morphed into one of understanding before turning his head towards Izuku. Izuku was in the process of lowering his hands down to his sides when his father suddenly grabbed his arms and pulled them as far away from his body as possible. "Izuku," his father began in a quiet voice. "I'm going to need you to make sure that you don't lower your hands fully until I tell you to." Izuku was trembling, tears coming from his eyes. "Daddy, I'm scared." Hisashi gave him a reassuring smile that looked all too shaky. "There's nothing to be afraid of, I'm just going to get some bandages for your mother. Then I'll make you some gloves and we'll head to see a nice doctor who can help us." Before Izuku could process his words, his father had dashed out of the room towards the bathroom. The young child turned his head towards his still crying mother. He didn't fully understand what was going on, but he understood one thing. He had done this. He had hurt Mommy. Only villains hurt innocent people. That's what Kaken always said. Did that make him a villain? Deku's eyes teared up. He wasn't a villain. He hadn't meant to hurt Mommy. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a villain. Deku was still crying when his father came back with several bandages and a pair of black gloves with the ring and pointer fingers missing. Hisashi sat next to his son in Dr. Tsubasa's office. He had no idea how his day had hit the fan so quickly. One minute he was cuddling with Inko for the first time in months, the next he was wrapping his wife's hands in bandages from the damage caused by his son's quirk. Hisashi winced at the last thought. Speaking of his son's quirk, it turns out he had inherited Inko's father's quirk. He didn't know much about the guy, but Inko had informed him of her parents' quirks once before when they were discussing Izuku's possible quirk. She had offhandedly mentioned that he always wore gloves with a few fingers cut out to avoid disintegrating things. Thank God he remembered that little quip. Inko was currently getting treated in another room, so he had decided to sit with his precious child while Izuku was getting tested. The poor thing was bawling his eyes out with a look that made Hisashi want to cuddle him. That unfortunately needed to wait until after the doctor confirmed it was safe. "Your son has quite the interesting quirk if I do say so myself." Dr. Tsubasa's tone was utterly uncaring. "From what I understand, his quirk destroys anything his 5 fingers touch, making it crumble to dust. From what we gathered, it does not matter if the target is organic or not, with the speed of decay varying with how hard he grips the object. It also seems to consistently spread from the target area when he grips hard enough, with the decay spreading throughout the area until the object is completely decayed. The effects do not seem to be voluntary, but they do not affect his own body. Quite frankly, your wife is lucky that she'll be walking away with only a bit of scarring." Izuku sobbed harder at those words. Hisashi reached out to cradle his son while glaring at the completely impassive doctor. Damn it, why would he say that in front of him? Did this a-hole want to traumatize his son, or was he just an idiot? They continued their glaring match as Hisashi tried to wrap his arms around Izuku. His precious son pulled his head away from Hisashi's grasp and scooted away from him. "My fault, it's all my fault." Hisashi sighed and tried to comfort his son. "Izuku." The boy did not hear him, still curled in on himself. "My fault." Hisashi's heart hurt at his child's murmurs of distress, but he did his best to not let it show. "Nothing's wrong, my little hero. Mommy is fine, and it was just an accident. Nobody blames you for anything." Izuku appeared to have not heard him and continued mumbling to himself. "It's all my fault." Izuku was watching his favorite All Might moment on repeat when Inko walked into the room. Hisashi had left to get groceries. insisting that she needed to rest and look after him. Silence filled the room. Izuku suddenly turned around, tears in his eyes. "Can I still be a hero, mommy, even with my quirk?" His voice was so small and pathetic that Inko almost responded yes. She almost assured him that he was fine the way he was and that he didn't need to worry one bit. She nearly told him that he could be a hero, just like her own mother. The camera zoomed in on the body. She saw everything. The lifeless eyes that stared back at her, the blood-covered black costume, the still smiling face that was her mother's trademark. The screen read, "Pro Hero Shimura found dead." She can't let that happen to him too. She wrapped her arms around him and cried with him, sobbing into his arms, able to repeat one phrase over and over again. "I'm so sorry, Izuku." Screams of terror rang out as he watched his parents turn to dust in his hands. Kaken's smile crumbled to nothing as he held his hand. All Might raised his fist, preparing to punch him. Izuku woke up terrified, gripping the sheets with his still glove-clad hands. He gripped his throbbing head. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Katsuki was wondering what was wrong with the shitty Deku. He'd been quiet and dead-eyed all morning, avoided touching people the whole day, had refused to do their super-secret handshake, and had gotten all tense and scared looking when he had slapped him on the back. Not to mention the weird gloves he was wearing. Seriously, who would design gloves with only 3 fingers? It looked stupid. At recess, he cornered him with his group of extras. "What's wrong, shitty Deku? Why have you been avoiding me all morning?" The shitty Deku looked around nervously, trying to find a way out of the situation. When he found none, he relented and bowed his head. "You know how yesterday was my 4th birthday?" Katsuki had honestly forgotten. After all, why would he need to keep track of the shitty Deku's birthday? Before he could respond, Deku continued. "Well, I kind of got my quirk yesterday." Katsuki got excited. He could finally know what his future sidekick's quirk was. This was awesome. "Well, spit it out, what is it?" Izuku's eyes teared up, distress evident on his face. "It's terrible, Kaken. It's evil and I hurt my mom when I first used it. It's so destructive and villainous. I can't save anyone with it. Without these gloves, I might have hurt someone just by walking around dash." Katsuki got bored of his speech and grabbed his future sidekick's gloves, quickly tearing them off to the shitty Deku's surprise. He brought them closer to his face and examined them with disinterest. "You mean these gloves? What's so special about them?" Deku desperately grabbed forward for them, feeling exposed and vulnerable. Katsuki, in surprise at the sudden movement, held up his left arm for Deku to grab. The shitty Deku's bare fingers met the smooth skin of his arms. It was an accident, a pure twist of fate, but neither would ever see it that way. Katsuki felt nothing for one moment, feeling as if he had made a mistake of some kind, before a burning sensation traveled up his arm. The young boy screamed and let go of the gloves, looking at the cracked and partial decayed skin of his left arm. The pain was unlike anything he had ever felt before, and it got more intense by the second. Deku swiped up the gloves and quickly put him on. He turned to Katsuki and reached out to help him. That same concerned look was on his face, taunting Katsuki with its pitying kindness. He looked so worried about his well-being. Katsuki was suddenly aware of all the eyes staring at them, all the eyes that got to see just how vulnerable he was. They peered into him, that same dim in pity all but radiating in waves towards him. Concern was likely on their faces as well. Everyone was looking down on him. Katsuki screeched, knocking the smaller boy to the ground with a powerful kick unintentionally aimed at the solar plexus. "Get away from me, you stupid villain!" Katsuki stood up and brushed himself off, desperately trying to save face right after facing such humiliation. He did his best to ignore the growing pain in his left arm and looked up at the trembling Deku in front of him. "If you ever come near me again, I'll kill you." With unnatural haughtiness for a 4-year-old, Katsuki turned to face a teacher and walked alongside him with a sneer to the nurse's office. He never saw the hurt, tearful look Deku shot at his back as he strolled away. Katsuki didn't talk to Izuku anymore after that. Neither did anyone else for that matter. 9-year-old Shigaraki was playing one of his favorite games, a remaster of the 200-year-old game known as BioShock, when Kurojiri poked his head into his room. "Young master, it's time to go to bed." Shigaraki half-heartedly grumbled about the unfairness of his curfew before saving his progress and turning off his console. He got up and started heading towards his bed when Kurojiri grabbed him by the shoulder. He glanced up in confusion at his caretaker's gesture. "I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that Sensei wished to talk to you first." Shigaraki's eyes widened and he dashed out of the room towards the TV in the bar. He quickly sat down in front of it and turned to look expectantly at his guardian. Kurojiri walked over and with a sigh, turned it on. The familiar words of "audio only" on the screen. "Shigaraki, my dear child, how are you doing?" The young child, being far too naive to the world around him, didn't notice the lack of emotion in the question or the subtle flinch of his caretaker at the sound of the voice. "I'm doing great, Sensei. I just beat that game you recommended to me. It was pretty garbage though. How are you doing?" Sensei let out a blatantly mirthless laugh before replying. "It's a pity you did not enjoy it, but I'm doing just fine, my dear child." Shigaraki's eyes sparkled as if they were stars at his sensei's words. The excitement and adoration on his face were almost adorable, causing a small smile to form under the fog of his guardian's face. "That's great, Sensei. Do you know if or when I'll get to see you next? I miss you so much." Sensei paused before continuing. "No, my child, I'm currently dealing with the problem of All Might dash. All Might would come and rescue him just like Sis said. He had to, because All Might saved everyone, regardless of if they were a hero or villain. He had to." The adults kept passing by, telling him the heroes would come eventually, before just walking away. He knew that the heroes would come as long as he stays put, just like his sis always said. Eventually. Why had nobody come to rescue him yet? Why was he all alone? Why were Mommy and Sis gone? Was he that pathetic? Did he matter that little? He was so hungry. He was so thirsty. He was so alone. Where were those footsteps coming from? And once that's over with, perhaps I'll come for a little visit. Shigaraki zoned back in and realized that he had missed the response to his question. "Can you repeat that again, Sensei?" Kurojiri noticeably flinched, but Sensei let out another mirthless laugh that echoed throughout the bar. "I'm sorry if my response bored you, my child. To keep it brief, I'll visit after All Might is dealt with." All Might. The name he hated more than anything. The man who promised to help others, no matter the circumstance, but never came to help him. He wanted to hurt him like he had been hurt, decay him until there was nothing left, tear his flesh apart, and scream about how he had never come to help him. But he was still too weak. He needed to get stronger. A crackle of static came from the television. "I apologize, but I must cut this call short. I hope we can speak again soon. Go to bed, my young ward, and dream about a better tomorrow without All Might." Kurojiri turned off the TV and turned to face the disappointed boy. With a gentleness that was quite unnatural for the career villain, the fog villain lifted up his young ward and carried him to his bedroom. The criminal gently laid him on the bed, pulled the covers to his ward's neck, and turned off the lamp next to his bed. With a small kiss on the forehead goodnight, Kurojiri left the room to resume his duties. Shigaraki went to sleep that night thinking of all the pain that he would cause All Might, and how proud Sensei would be when he achieved his goal. Illegal use of powers during rush hour and robbery resulting in bodily harm. Kamui Woods posed dramatically. "You are truly the incarnation of evil." His wooden arm rapidly grew outwards attempting to surround the villain. Binding. Lacquered chain pre-dash. Canyon cannon. Mountain Lady slammed into the giant villain with a powerful dropkick. The villain was sent flying into the street, landing unconscious in the middle of it. After a few moments of shock, many members of the paparazzi pulled out their cameras and surrounded the villain, taking pictures of him. Many also took the time to take a picture of Mountain Lady, who was flirtatiously winking and posing for the surrounding crowd. Money shot. Money shot. Money shot. Money shot. Money shot. Izuku ignored the annoying reporters and continued writing his observations of the fight. He distantly heard a man saying something in the background, but he didn't care enough to listen. Besides, he needed to finish up and get going. If he took much longer then he would be late for school. As he was walking away, he mumbled his observations to himself and wrote them in his journal. Izuku was quite an interesting teen to look at. He was really short for his age, standing at only around 150 cms. His skin was dry and flaky, small scraps coming off of his neck and mouth when he scratched those inflamed areas every so often. His hair was slightly longer than normal, giving him a slightly off-putting, unkempt appearance. He wore a simple loose-fitting hoodie that more than covered his entire upper body. When he moved to scratch his neck, 2 odd black gloves with the pointer and ring fingers missing were on his hands. His most striking feature, however, was his red eyes. They were unflinchingly cold and seemed to glow in the dark. Whenever he looked at someone, it felt like his gaze was piercing right through their soul. He wasn't particularly handsome, but he would have been somewhat cute if it wasn't for some of his more off-putting traits. As the young teen walked down the street, he quietly mumbled to himself as he wrote in his journal. Lady displayed a very noticeable desire for personal glory, suggesting that it would be easy to separate her off or use her against her teammates in a fight. Kamui's attack appeared to have a large wind-up time, which could open him up to a free attack. What kind of wood does he use anyway? It might be worth looking into it at least a little bit. Izuku took a look over his notes to make sure they were satisfactory. He needed to make sure he was ready to fight against anyone at any time during hero work, just like his father always told him. 7-year-old Izuku sat with his dad in front of the TV, ready to start the new training his father had talked about. His father smirked at his excited expression and ruffled his hair. Now Izuku, today I'll be teaching you something you need to practice even while I'm away. You need to promise me that you'll practice it every day. Izuku reverently nodded his head. Yes, Daddy. His father resisted the urge to squeal in happiness from how cute his son was, as he slowly explained the training he wanted his son to practice. Good, what I'm teaching you today is how to analyze. As a hero, you need to be ready to fight against any enemy at a moment's notice. Knowledge is power, and not knowing your enemy could very easily get you killed. The same goes for your allies. Izuku pet his head childishly. But why would I need to be ready to fight my allies? Aren't they there to help me? Hisashi smiled sadly. You never know when an ally might turn against you during a fight. We live in a society where everything from mind control to memory alteration exists, not to mention other reasons such as blackmail. You never know when an ally might be turned against you, and thus you need to be ready to defeat them at a moment's notice as well. Do you understand? Izuku nodded feverishly. Yes. His father smirked before handing him a simple notebook and a pencil. Good, then our training can begin. His father had spent days drilling him on the most efficient ways to analyze a person and their weaknesses. He had practiced the process over and over again, with more heroes and villains than he could possibly count. He was nowhere near as good as his father, but he was pretty damn close. Glancing over through the window of a nearby cafe, he suddenly stilled and slammed his notebook shut. He started running like hell itself was on his heels. Sheet, he was going to be late. Katsuki ignored the annoying yammering on in front of the class about knowing what they were going to do with their lives. Why should he care? He already knew that he was the protagonist destined to be the #1 hero. The annoying smirked and threw papers into the air. But you're all planning to go into the hero course, right? All the annoying extras around him started cheering like the side characters they were. Teach, don't lump us all in the same group. I'm not going to be stuck in the bottom with the rest of these rejects. Katsuki laughed vocally at the protests of the imbeciles who surrounded him. Did they really think they could be heroes with their pathetic excuses for quirks? They'd be crushed within days of leaving the academy. The teacher looked down at a sheet lying on his desk. Oh, that's right, you're planning to go to UA, right, Bakugu? Katsuki grinned at the disbelieving whispers of the extras around him. The side characters really should have known that's where he was going to go. The best of the best came from UA and only UA. To make sure he was the top dog, he needed to make his way into that school. Then, nothing could stop his ascension to greatness. His teacher suddenly grimaced before looking up with a strained smile. I see that you applied for UA too, Midoria. Everyone in the class froze. They all slowly turned around and looked at the student in the back, slouched over, and writing in a notebook. He continued to do so for a few seconds before he noticed everyone staring at him. Flushing slightly, he gave them all a shy smile. Everyone turned around and started whispering as Katsuki felt his temper begin to flare. Why did that shitty antagonist always have to steal the spotlight? Deku constantly looked down on him by refusing to use that quirk of his and loved humiliating him by acting like a defenseless victim. They both knew he could easily kill almost everyone in the class, but he continued to oppose him by acting like a wounded deer. He was the opposite of him, the antagonist of the story. The only thing he could be was the villain. Katsuki rubbed the still-present scar on top of his hand, remembering the humiliation Izuku had inflicted on him so soon after getting his quirk. The only thing that Deku was good for was hurting people. Without a second thought, Katsuki stood up and blasted Izuku out of his desk. The smaller teen stared up at him with fear as he moved close. How dare you think for even a second that you could be a hero? The only thing you'll be good for is being a decent villain for me to beat into the ground when I'm number one. Maybe you should stop hiding what everyone here already know and show your true colors already. For just a second, Katsuki saw immense hatred in Deku's eyes. For just a second, Deku's left hand edged towards his right hand's glove. For just a second, Katsuki smirked because he'd finally pushed Deku to show who he really was. But it was only for a second. Deku's face almost immediately became tranquil once again. Instead of attacking like the villain he was, he stood up and simply fixed his chair before sitting back down. Katsuki fumed, sparks lighting up from his hands. His eyes burned with fiery rage. Why couldn't he stop looking down at him? Just attack already. Stop acting like he wasn't worth the time of day. Before Katsuki could try again though, the teacher barked at him to sit down. Begrudgingly, he obeyed. As the class went on though, he did nothing but stare hatefully at Deku every chance he could. Izuku rushed to the exit of the room as soon as the bell rung, but Katsuki immediately blocked his path and pushed him back inside. Katsuki waited for everyone to leave the room before he grabbed Deku and shoving him hard against the wall. This was different. Normally he refused to touch him. Izuku resisted the urge to scratch at his itchy neck, nervousness filling his body. Katsuki usually refused to even hit him, relying on his blasts more than his fists. He knew how much it triggered his fight or flight response. Knew how scared he got when someone touched him. Izuku twitched unhappily in place as Katsuki began to growl like an animal. Deku! Izuku ignored the childish nickname, resisting the urge to stop hyperventilating. He didn't like being touched. He didn't like being touched. He didn't like being touched. Please let go of me, Katsuki. His former friend ignored his obvious discomfort, continuing to pretend he didn't notice the constant squirming. Don't apply for UA. They would never accept someone as evil as you. Izuku didn't hear his friend, his anxiety getting worse and worse by the second. He didn't like being touched. He didn't like being touched. He didn't like being touched. Please let go of me, Katsuki. Katsuki continued to rant nonsense. You are nothing more than my foil, an antagonist for me to defeat. I'm the main hero and you're the main villain. Just realize that already so I can show everyone how awesome I am and beat you into the dash. He didn't like being touched. He didn't like being touched. He didn't like being touched. Let go of me. Izuku kicked Katsuki hard in the solar plexus, escaping his grip and causing the other boy to stumble backward. Izuku calmed down. It was okay. No one got hurt. He didn't hurt him again. He didn't hurt anyone. He wasn't going to hurt anyone ever again. Katsuki was wrong. Izuku almost missed Katsuki's next words in his effort to calm down. You villainous F-. Why don't you just save me the trouble and just jump off the roof already? It's not like anyone will carry their way. Katsuki dashed angrily out of the room, leaving Izuku in shock. Is that what he thought of him? Did his former friend really hate him that much? Was he really that bad? Izuku's guilt consumed him and he curled up against the wall, sobbing softly to himself in the corner, mumbling to himself over and over again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Izuku's walk home was quiet. All he could do was ruminate over his day, trying to figure out where he had gone wrong. He had finally calmed down from his fight with Katsuki, but he still felt frustrated. On one hand, he was at fault for being such a monster. After all, who wouldn't hate him after all the stuff he had done? He grabbed desperately for his gloves. Screaming, so much screaming. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Izuku shook himself to clear his head. On the other hand, Katsuki was just as bad. He burned him, cursed him, and harassed him constantly with little to no remorse. He constantly called him a villain. Deku's eyes teared up. He wasn't a villain. He hadn't meant to hurt Mommy. Deku shook his head harder this time, trying to dispel his memories completely. If he was being honest, he hated Katsuki, and he knew the feeling was mutual. Yet he couldn't really blame Kaken for his harassment. He had done far too much to ever earn even the slightest bit of friendship back. That look of utter hatred and fear on his face. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Izuku violently rattled himself for the third time and ground his teeth in frustration. Why couldn't his memories just leave him alone? He already knew how much of a sheep person he was. He didn't need to keep being reminded of that fact. Izuku turned into the tunnel he usually took when he went home. He was so deep in thought that he almost missed the clatter of a manhole moving behind him. Almost. He dodged to the right just in time to see a green mass of goo fly past him. The mass mumbled quietly as it turned towards him, revealing 2 yellow eyes and a widely grinning mouth. Invisibility cloak size S. It took Izuku a second, but he recognized the mass as a villain he'd analyzed from the news about a day ago. Shinya Fukamatsu, 1. Otherwise known as the sludge villain. Mutant-type quirk, slime, it makes his body a mass of liquid mud. Villain rank, D. Weaknesses, extremely cocky, cowardly, and is completely helpless when dried. His visible body parts are also quite vulnerable. Before Izuku could think of a plan, Shinya jumped out at him again. Barely dodging the attack, Izuku decided to try and make his way out of the tunnel to reach help. That was easier said than done, however, with the man constantly leaping at him. Luckily, he was quite well versed in dodging large attacks, allowing him to easily keep up with the leaps from the villain. As he was nearing the edge of the tunnel though, he made the mistake of looking behind him as Shinya as he leaped at him. In his desire to check his surroundings, he tripped and fell down on the ground. It was only for a second, but it was all that Shinya needed. Instantly, Izuku was covered in slime. He couldn't breathe or move, he could only struggle against the liquid body. He thrashed helplessly, only making the villain laugh maliciously. He didn't want to die. Despite how miserable his social life was, he still had his mother and father. He couldn't leave just them behind. In his desperation, Izuku grabbed his right glove in his left hand and, after a moment's hesitation, removed it. He hated his quirk, more than what was probably healthy for him, but his need to survive overpowered his hate. "Struggle all you want, kid, but nothing you do will harm me." Shinya laughed. Izuku freed up enough space for his arm to reach up and grab the villain's eyeball. All Might rushed through the sewers trying to figure out where the villain had gone. He should have been able to easily catch him, but his time was nearly up for the day and he was really starting to low down. Hearing an ear-piercing scream coming from a manhole right above him, he punched upwards and jumped through the opening without a second thought. "Do not worry, citizen. I am here." It took him a few seconds for him to realize that the screaming was coming from the villain he had been chasing. He was hunched over in the corner, hugging an empty spot on his body where All Might vaguely remembered seeing an eye before. From what little he could tell from the villain's expression, he looked absolutely terrified. Off to the side, he saw a small child in a hoodie with a single glove on his right hand throwing up what appeared to be green mud from the villain's body. All Might hesitated for a second at the confusing sight before punching the villain hard enough to splatter him against the other side of the tunnel. Deciding to check on the still barfing kid first, he ran to his side and looked him over. Unsure how to help, he asked an admittedly quite dumb question. "Hey kid, are you all right?" The child finally regurgitated what looked to be the last of the mud, before turning to look at him with a look of shock and fear. On closer inspection of the kid's face, it became more obvious that what he thought was a child of about 10 was actually just a small teenager. Really tiny one if he was being honest. His red eyes pierced through him, almost as if they knew his every regret and mistake. All Might took a step back, which seemed to make the child whimper and shake pathetically even more. There was something about those red eyes that looked very familiar, but he couldn't place exactly what. Maybe he has met him before? As he realized that the teen was still staring at him in shock and fear, he straightened himself up and decided to wait for him to speak. He shouldn't rush him, that would just make him even more terrified. The teen finally calmed down, suddenly looking to the ground in what appeared to be shame. He trembled in fear for another minute before speaking in a downtrodden voice. "Are you going to arrest me?" All Might was stupefied. "What?" The child trembled before grabbing his head and clutching it. "I used my quirk without a license and severely injured the villain. Even if it was in self-defense, what I did was illegal." All Might stared at the child, baffled that he could think such a thing, before laughing at the absurdity of the question. When the teen looked up with a confused face, All Might stopped laughing and patted the child on the back. The young boy noticeably stiffened at the contact, causing All Might to make a mental note at avoiding physical contact for the rest of their conversation. "Of course not, young man, what you did here was totally justified. Why, in your place, I would have done the same thing. Besides, it's not illegal to use your quirk in self-defense." The kid looked up at him in shock with those stunningly familiar eyes. Where had he seen them before? The teen looked like he was about to protest, but All Might cut him off by holding out a hand for him to grab while smiling gently. "You didn't do anything wrong. Don't worry, I am here for you." The kid stared at him for a moment, before placing on an odd glove with 2 fingers missing on it. He reached out with hesitation and grabbed All Might's hand, being pulled to his feet. All Might gave him one more small smile before turning around to look at the villain that was still splattered against the wall. Now how could he take care of this? Izuku was still in shock. Freaking All Might had come to save him. His #1 idol had come and saved him. That was so cool. As he watched All Might walk back over from putting the shinya in a bottle, the realization of what just happened hit him. He had screwed up badly during his fight. He had made a basic mistake that his mother and father had drilled him not to do repeatedly. He would have died if All Might didn't show up. Izuku rubbed his hand. Not to mention that he had just used his accursed quirk. He suddenly felt disgusted with himself. If the Shinya had been any other villain, there's a good chance that he could have died from decay. If he had to kill people to be a hero, then what kind of a shitty person was he? As he wallowed in his guilt, he didn't notice All Might walking over to his backpack and grabbing a book that had fallen out. Izuku didn't realize that All Might was reading it until he heard a noise of shock come from the man. Turning to see what he was holding, Izuku blushed when he realized he was holding his notebook. He must have gasped at how bad his notes were. It was so embarrassing. "This is amazing. So many heroes would pay quite a bit for this kind of analysis. I've seen professional quirk analysts with less talent than you, young man." Izuku felt starstruck. All Might had just complimented his note. This had to be a dream. There's no way that life could be this good to him. All Might whirled around, his signature grin still on his face. "You've got a real talent here, young Midoriya." Izuku was perplexed by how his idol knew his name. Seeing the look of confusion, All Might pointed at his name tag tapped to the front of the book. That made sense. All Might he reached in his pocket and pulled out a pen. "Would you like me to sign it?" Almost faster than All Might could process, Izuku had grabbed the notebook, flipped it to a blank page, and placed it back in his hands. All Might was a bit off-put at the excitement, but grinned and signed the page anyway before subsequently handing the book back to the excited Izuku. Izuku bowed formally to the ground with enormous enthusiasm, once again causing All Might to be slightly put off. Honestly, he appreciated the admiration, but this was a bit much. All Might turned around and walked forward a few steps before crouching to the ground. He gave him a small salute as he tensed his legs up in preparation for takeoff. "Well, young Midoriya, I'm off. I'm counting on you to support me out there." As he leaped off the ground, it took All Might a second to realize that the kid was hanging off his leg. Feeling an enormous amount of shock, All Might quickly turned to look for a building to land on as blood started dripping from the left side of his mouth. As soon as they landed, All Might did his best to admonish the small teen harshly. Are you suicidal, kid? You could have easily gotten yourself killed. Think before you do something like that. The child winced and curled up into a sitting position, looking very guilty and childlike. He looked far too innocent for a child of his age. The old hero sighed. The teen was just an excited fanboy and probably didn't think too much about his actions. He probably expected him to stop when he grabbed onto his leg. The boy wasn't really at fault. He should have just checked before he had recklessly leaped away. Also, he just honestly couldn't find it in him to stay angry at that childish face and piercing eyes. Seriously, where had he seen them before? All Might felt pain flare in his torso and quickly turned around. Well, I need to leave, young Midoria. I hope you have a nice day. The kid shot up and meekly yelled to him as he prepared to jump again. Wait, I have a question for you. All Might paused. He really should get going, but something about the kid's tone made him hesitate. Can a person be a hero, even if their quirk is evil? All Might stumbled forward in shock. That was not quite what he was expecting to hear. As he moved to turn around and answer, steam started to pour out of him as he deflated. Shit, he was out of time. The boy didn't notice, talking to himself quietly as he explained his question. It's just that I've always been told how villainous I was by my peers. They go on about how my quirk is evil and how I should guilty for having it. I honestly can't blame them, since all I can do with it is hurt. Despite that, I just wanted to hear what you thug dash. Izuku stopped talking. In front of him stood what looks like an emaciated version of All Might. What the actual F dash? Across town, Katsuki kicked a can repeatedly into a wall. Shitty effing Deku, always looking down on him. Always giving him those looks of sorrow. He didn't need his effing apologies. He needed him to stop refusing to fight him with his shitty quirk. He needed to beat that F into the ground. The fucker humiliated him, and continued to do so to this day. Deku grabbed him in front of everyone and made him look weak and pathetic. Yet now, he didn't have the ball to fight him like a real man. He needed to beat Deku going all out to prove it was just a fluke that he humiliated him. He needed to show everyone just how pathetic he really was. Katsuki kicked the can one more time before he started walking out of the alleyway. Then a bottle landed on his head. Katsuki cursed and rubbed his head before grabbing the stupid bottle. It had some kind of disgusting green goo in it and smelled like absolute shit. Angry, he threw it with an explosion-enhanced throw at the wall, splitting it open. Katsuki turned around to leave, mumbling about flying bottles and Deku before he stopped at the sound of rustling behind him. My, what a strong quirk you have. Izuku was in shock. What the hell had just happened? All Might had suddenly deflated in front of him. Was this man a shapeshifter disguised as All Might? No, he had showcased super strength earlier, indicating that he would have needed more than one quirk. Izuku froze. There was only one person he knew of who had more than one quirk. It was too rare of a condition for it to be anyone else. Izuku got in a battle-ready stance, shaking in fear. He wasn't ready. He had been prepared all his life and he still wasn't ready. He was nowhere near the level he needed to be to face. As he prepared to fight though, the All Might imposter sighed and sat down. Was this some kind of trick? A way to get his guard down? Well, it wasn't going to work on high. The imposter spoke to him kindly, sounding annoyed but more at himself than anyone else. I bet you're confused, kid. Just give me a chance to explain. Izuku paused. The voice was so distinctly All Might. This didn't feel like All for One. That monster was supposed to be eldritch, radiating killing intent and power. Looking closer, the man definitely didn't seem like him either. His mother had described All for One as a muscled man who was unable to display true emotion, while this man was thin and wiry, self-annoyance being very clear on his face. Hesitantly, Izuku sat down to listen to the man. The All Might imposter, no, All Might raised up his shirt to reveal a massive wound. Izuku was disturbed. He had seen scars before, his dad had one on his forehead, but he had never seen such an ugly one before. I got this 5 years ago in a fight against a powerful villain. The battle was more brutal than I could have anticipated, and though I won, it cost me more than what I would have liked. This is what heroics can do to you, kid. The man let his words sink in before he continued. As for your question, it's really up to you. If you really feel that you have a villainous quirk, then you have to ask yourself one question. Can you handle the discrimination? All Might winced. As much as pains me to say it, even heroes aren't immune to quirk discrimination. Many such as Gang Orca and Ectoplasm have experienced plenty of it throughout their entire lives. There's a good chance you'll be hated and under constant suspicion. With how innocent you appear to be, I doubt you'd be able to handle it. Izuku hadn't gotten the answer he feared or the answer he hoped for. Honestly, he really didn't know what to think about the statement. It was frustrating how little it answered for him. Then something about what he said earlier caught his attention. He said that a villain had damaged him. Could it be? Was that villain 5 years ago All for One? All Might stood there gobsmacked. How do you know Dash? All Might's question was interrupted by an explosion in the distance. They both turned towards the noise. Somewhat far away, he could see large plumes of smoke emanating into the air. It was a telltale sign of a villain attack. All Might ran to the staircase, before pausing and turning to pin Izuku down with a look. Stay here and don't you dare move. I have some questions for you. Faster than a man like him should be able to, All Might dashed down the stairs. Izuku stood frozen for a second, unsure of what to do, before rushing after his idol. Izuku arrived on the scene a few minutes later, to discover a crowd gathered together. Trying to analyze the situation, he noted the direction everyone was facing. As he got a quick glance at the scene in front of him, his breath got caught in his throat. Katsuki was in Shinya's grasp, the villain the same stranglehold he had been earlier. What? When did he? Izuku suddenly remembered grabbing onto All Might's leg. The same leg that had been holding Shinya's bottle. The same leg he had latched onto without paying attention. The universe and its cosmic sense of irony. Okay, he had to think about this logically. What heroes were on the scene? He looked around and saw Kamui Woods, Deathgaro, and Backdraft. He also noted MT Lady, who was some distance away, having trouble getting to the incident. This was bad. This was really bad. None of them were well equipped to deal with Shinya, especially not when he had Katsuki in his grasp struggling. He looked back, seeing Katsuki's fear-filled face staring back at him. The eyes that always looked at him with such arrogance and hatred now were filled with a silent plea for help. The proud teen genuinely feared for his life enough to put aside his pride. He was truly terrified. Before he knew what he was doing, Izuku was already moving toward Shinya. Why was he doing this? Shinya noticed him moving forward and screamed in terror for him to go away. Why was he doing this? Izuku thought as he dodged a blast of slime and grabbed a rock in one fluid motion. Not taking time to aim, he threw the rock at Shinya's remaining eye, hitting it by complete luck. Why was he doing this? Izuku grabbed Katsuki, trying to pull him out of the slime. The boy struggled against him, seemingly refusing to be saved by him despite the terrible situation he was in. He hated Katsuki, so why was he trying to save him? Then he remembered why. That's what I love so much about you, Izuku. His father's voice was soft as he patted his head. You run into danger to save people, no matter the cost to yourself. You're willing to do anything to help anyone with their problems, regardless of how you'll be affected or how terrible they are. You are selfless to a fault. As dangerous as that trait is, it'll help you be a better hero than I was. Izuku, filled with determination after that memory, pulled hard enough to just Katsuki out of Shinya's body. With the little strength he had left, he pushed Katsuki aside, moving into the path of a tentacle flying at the two of them. Before it hit, however, a blur grabbed it in midair. With the strength of Caprican, a monster who could shatter mountains, All Might pulled his fist back and punched the villain, splitting the heavens themselves apart through sheer force, splattering the villain against the walls and clearing the very clouds from the sky. Izuku was walking home alone and frustrated. He had been admonished by the heroes for his reckless rescue, with All Might not even making eye contact with him as he talked to reporters. He had really screwed up. He already knew All Might was coming and leaped in like a reckless idiot. He truly was hopeless. He sighed to himself, thinking over the chaos of the past day. He froze as he heard someone running up behind him. For the love of God, If it was another villain, he was going to lose it. Izuku turned around to discover Katsuki panting behind him. Not sure how to respond, he waited for his peer to finish catching his breath and speak up. Don't think you humiliating me a second time gives you the right to look down on me. You're still a shitty Deku with a villainous quirk. I'm going to beat you into the ground one day. He then turned around and stomped away like a petulant child. So that just happened. He turned around. Katsuki was right though, no matter what he was just a useless hero wannabe with a villainous quirk. Maybe he should just give you. A blur dashed in front of him. Son of a bit. I am here. All Might proceeded to deflate right in front of him, vomiting liters of blood all over him. Why did people keep jumping out at him today? It was getting annoying. Despite his annoyance, Izuku bowed his head apologetically. I apologize for my interference, All Might. I ended up just being a nuisance and inconvenience to you. I hope you can forgive me. The older hero looked startled at his statement. Young man, what are you talking about? I came here to thank you. Izuku recoiled. Thank me? For what? All Might's signature grin fell somewhat. I hate to admit it, but recently I feel like I've been faltering. Back there, I didn't think I had it in me to save that boy. Deep down though, I knew that I was lying. I just didn't want to risk myself selfishly, trying to justify my actions by saying that I couldn't do anything, that I was at my limit. All Might bowed his head. I truly am pathetic. Before Izuku could respond to the crushing realization of just how human his idol was, All Might continued. But then you ran up there. You, a tiny boy who hates their own quirk, risked your life to save someone when no one else did. You would have died if I didn't interfere, but you still went in anyway. When I saw that, I was spurred into action. For that, I thank you, my boy. All Might held out his hand. I apologize for my callous remark earlier. Let's start over. My hero name is All Might. It is nice to meet you. Izuku, a bit flabbergasted at the apology coming from his idol, took All Might's massive mitt with his small, gloved hand. My name is Midoria, Midoria Izuku. All Might's eyes widened in recognition. You wouldn't happen to be related to Shimura Inko, would you? Izuku nodded. Yes, that's my mother's maiden name. Do you know her? All Might shook his head. Not personally, but her mother was my master. Izuku was shocked. Wait, his grandmother was All Might's master? Why was he never told about this? All Might waved his hand dismissively. Either way, let's move on to more important matters. Izuku mumbled to himself. That sounded pretty important to me. All Might continued, ignoring him. I want to know, in your own words, why you ran up there to save that boy. Izuku thought for a second. He already knew why, but how should he phrase it? I guess, it's just what I had to do. It doesn't matter who it is, when I see a person struggling, I just can't ignore them. No matter who they are or what I have to do, I feel like I need to end their struggle. I can't find it in me just to walk away. It didn't matter if the person trapped back there had been the worst villain in history or the greatest hero, I still would have tried to help them. All Might stood there, smiling wider than Izuku had ever seen anyone smile before. Young man, I made a mistake doubting you earlier. I want to fix that now. Young Midoriya dash. All Might stood over him, giving him the brightest smile he could muster. You can be a hero. Izuku was stunned, his eyes sparkling, his face betraying how starstruck he was. Tears began to form in his eyes. The words he'd wanted to hear for so long were finally being told to him. He clutched his chest and knelt down, letting all his tears flow. He could be a hero. He could be a hero. He could be a hero. I deem you worthy of my power. My quirk is yours to inherit. Izuku froze, unsure what to make of what he just said. What? Shigaraki sat on his couch flipping through the channels. Boring. 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 20-year-old Shigaraki paused just in time to stop himself from changing the channel. The news channel on the screen showed a young child in a black hoodie and wearing gloves with 2 missing fingers. Pausing the TV screen, he moved closer to get a better look at the boy. Something about his face was familiar. Child named Izu Midoriya saves his classmate from a villain. only to be saved in turn by All Might. Shigaraki scratched absent-mindedly at his neck. Midoriya Izukuha? He looked so DMN familiar, he just couldn't place why though. Taking a closer look, Shigaraki flicked his eyes over the teen's pale flaky skin, messy hair, and odd gloves. He wore similar gloves to bed every night, in order to prevent decaying something in his sleep accidentally. They were a nice crutch to keep him from destroying things accidentally. Now far more interested, Shigaraki looked over the child closer, noticing something that nearly made his heart stop. The child had dark, crimson eyes, the color of blood. Eyes that struck fear into people just by looking at them. Eyes that pierced into people's souls. Eyes that were identical to his own. Shigaraki scratched his throat, his curiosity more than a little aroused. Congratulations Midoriya Izuku, you've piqued my interest. What? All Might laughed at the expression on the child's shocked face. Oh my god, you should see your face right now. After laughing for a moment more, All Might smirked and pointed his finger up to the sky. Decide now young Izuku, do you want to inherit my quirk? Izuku stared for a second more before he started murmuring everything he knew about All Might. The words were coming out so fast that All Might didn't really know what he was saying. After standing there awkwardly for a moment, All Might cleared his throat to regain the attention of the still muttering Izuku. Blushing, Izuku stopped talking and motioned at him to continue. As I was saying, All Might began. My quirk is an ability known as One for All. It is a quirk passed down through the generations with one person cultivating the power before passing it on to the next. It continues to grow as it gets passed along, getting more and more powerful. But why me? There are hundreds of stronger quirk users out there to give this power to. With One for All, they could be unstoppable. All I am is a useless villain. Izuku said self-depreciatively. All Might's smile grew wider and he shook his head. You don't understand young Izuku, I didn't pick you based off quirk strength. I picked you based off your heroic nature. You were the only one to jump in and save that boy, and based off what you said earlier, you did it for non-selfish reasons. The fact that you are acknowledging that you are not the strongest candidate for my quirk says a lot about you. Izuku looked down and considered it. The offer was like a dream come true for him. Who wouldn't want to become the next All Might? But could he do it? Could he live with that kind of pressure on his head? That I'll do it. Izuku was walking home from his meeting with All Might. After exchanging phone numbers, Izuku had promised to meet him at Dagoba Municipal Beach Park tomorrow morning. For what, he had no idea. As Izuku walked into his house, he noticed something off. There was no noise and all the lights were off. He walked forward for a second before stopping to survey his surroundings. As he stood there, a masked figure in a cloak leaped out from behind the wall in front of him and threw a quick jab towards his chest. Izuku jumped back and dodged the continuous stream of attacks coming at him. Suddenly, he felt his foot being pulled out from under him and he fell hard onto the floor. The figure pinned him to the ground, completely restricting his movements and holding him against the floor. Izuku groaned. Mom, you need to stop doing this. The masked figure removed her mask to reveal a tired-looking woman. Under her eyes were bags that looked like they'd been there a long time, as well as many frown marks on her face. As she stood up from her son's position on the floor, she removed her cloak to reveal a muscular but short body. Looking closer at the woman, it became increasingly clear just how short she was, not being much taller than the diminutive Izuku. The woman smiled at her son before hesitantly wrapping her hand around his arm to pull him up from the floor. Sorry, honey. Inko began. I just need to make sure that you're ready if a villain were to attack you when you got home. You never know when someone's going to be waiting for you in your house, ready to strike. Izuku rolled his eyes. He was used to his mother's paranoia by now. She was constantly afraid of villain attacks from the villain that had killed his grandmother. She constantly attacked him when he got home to prepare him for a villain attack, and today was far from the craziest attack she had pulled. He had found out the hard way that his mother had knives all over the house, which she was ready to pull towards her for a fight at any moment. His mother slapped him upside the head before he realized that he had mumbled that aloud. His mom glared for a second more, before walking over to the couch and sitting down. She motioned Izuku over to sit down next to her, which he promptly did. "So, Izuku," his mom began. "Did anything interesting happen today?" Izuku nervously scratched at his neck, an unfortunate habit that had been increasing the past few months. "No." His mother glared at him in annoyance. "Oh really? Then I guess that villain attack you were involved in was nothing then." Izuku started sweating hard. No matter how he answered his mom here, he was screwed. "Well, you see dash. What the hell, Izuku? I told you to stay away from that stuff. You could easily get yourself killed." Inko screamed in rage. Izuku felt a twinge of anger in him. "I couldn't just let Kaken die, Mom. And what do you owe that little fucker anyway? He's done nothing but torture you for years. Name one good reason why you saved him. What kind of hero would I be if I just let him die?" Izuku only realized how royally he had screwed up after his mom got up and loomed over him. "And why are you so insistent on being a hero anyway? For fame, money, girls? What is so damn interesting about risking your life day after day? All you'd accomplish is attracting all for one to our doorstep." Izuku was sick of this conversation. No matter how many times he tried to explain why he wanted to be a hero, she would always try to crush his dreams and explain why he was stupid for even thinking that. "I just want to help people." "Then be a goddamn firefighter or doctor. Choose anything that won't attract attention. I won't stop you if you choose this pathway, but I will do everything in my power to dissuade you." Izuku got up and walked to his room. He ignored his mother's protest for him to stop walking away and slammed the door behind him. He let himself fall face down onto the bed. Today had been a long day. "Well, this is quite interesting," Shigaraki mumbled to himself. He had just spent the last several hours researching the Izuku boy that shared so many similarities with him, but had yet to find anything substantial. No matter what he searched, he couldn't find anything. No records, no addresses, not even a file in the copy of the Quirk database that Sensei had given him a few years back. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make the boy difficult to find. But that wouldn't dissuade someone like him. Contrary to what other villains know about him, he was a rather smart man. If he couldn't find where the boy lived online, he could find out through tailing and surveillance. He clicked back to the news report and looked at the uniform Izuku was wearing. A black Gakurin uniform with yellow buttons. Using that as a reference point, Shigaraki checked out the school uniforms in the area near the incident. Flipping through the different schools, Shigaraki found a uniform that matched at Aldera Junior High. Grinning to himself, Shigaraki leaned back and thought over what he should do with this information. Right now, the only thing substantial he knew about the strangely similar boy was his name and appearance. He didn't know his personality, personal morals, or even what his quirk was. It was much too early in his curiosity to jump to kidnapping, and murder would solve nothing in his current situation, leaving only talking to him and stalking left on the table. Shigaraki was a lot of things, but he was not a good stalker. He lacked the patience to wait long PRDS of time for his target to move, as well as an overall lack of stealth in general. Plus he wanted to know more about the kid and why he looked so strikingly similar to him, which stalking wouldn't accomplish. But how could he talk to the kid without RSNG suspicion? The untransformed All Might was waiting for his new pupil on the beach. Checking the time on his watch again, he started feeling impatient. Where was he? Looking around, he finally saw his pupil running at a breakneck speed towards him. After throwing the sheepish-looking boy an annoyed look, he sighed and turned towards the beach. "Do you have any idea why I wanted to meet you here, young Izuku?" Izuku blinked in confusion. "No, you never told me. The main reason is that as you are now, you are not ready to inherit one for all." All Might felt uncomfortable at the crestfallen look on his pupil's face. "Don't give me that look. Let me rephrase what I said. One for all is a lot to handle. Your current body, while strong," All Might looked up and down at the rather toned body the short boy had, "is not fully ready to handle it. If you're not ready to handle it, your limbs could literally explode under the pressure." After letting the boy process that mental image, All Might waved his arm towards the beach in front of him. "So we are going to use this beach to help build you some more muscles." His pupil looked over the expansive beach and gulped. Wouldn't it be better to go to an actual gym? Yes, but there is more than one reason I chose this route for building muscle. All Might began. I recently found out that this beach used to be quite the beauty, but it's fallen into total disrepair over the past couple of years. A hero should try to give back to the community in everything he does. All Might turned to look at his pupil's reaction and sweat dropped when he saw that he was writing down everything he had been saying. All Might cleared his throat to get his pupil's attention and continued. This will be the majority of your training, young Izuku. But there is one more thing I need. If you can remember, can you give me your measurements now? After getting his pupil's measurement and realizing just how short his pupil was at 150 centimeters tall, he put the measurement into his American Dream plan he had made and adjusted it for them. All Might handed the plan to his pupil. This is my American Dream plan, a schedule accounting for what you'll be doing to get you ready for UA. It accounts for when you'll sleep, what you'll eat, and when you'll need to recover. If we follow this plan, we'll be able to get you more than ready for One for All and the UA exam. All Might grinned down at his determined-looking pupil beneath him. Now, young Izuku, to achieve this you'll have to go beyond Dash plus Ultra. They both shouted in unison. It had been 4 months since he had started tailing the kid to find out more about him. He now knew where he lived when he left school and what he did after it, but he still didn't know how to approach him. He couldn't just go up and introduce himself to the kid and risk scaring him off, and he couldn't just teleport him into the lair either. Kurojiiri didn't know and didn't question his long disappearances, and he wanted to keep it that way. He needed a plan, some way to make the kid come up to him and want to talk. The best time would be when he's alone in a grocery store or something. Shigaraki considered his options for a while. How could he get this lonely kid to come up to hi? Wait, that's it. Izuku was creeped out. A creepy hooded figure had been continuously staring at him the past couple of days while he was cleaning. He was massive compared to him, looking a full 30 centimeters taller, and never seemed to do anything other than stare. It was creepy even if All Might didn't seem to think it was a big deal. He sighed to himself as he walked into the grocery store to buy some things for his mom. His mentor was a decently smart guy, but he was just very naive when it came to others' motives. He kept mumbling to himself as he put the items on the checkout counter. When he moved to pay for his food, the clerk pulled out some cash and put it in the register. He then removed the correct amount of change for what he paid and pocketed it and the rest of the money. Izuku stared in confusion for a minute. What had just happened? After standing there for a moment, the clerk motioned for him to move on. Izuku began. Why did you just pay for me? The clerk pointed over to a nearby bench where the same hooded figure from the beach was now sitting. That kid over there said he wanted to pay for whatever you bought. He told me to keep the change, not that I'm complaining. Unnerved, Izuku grabbed his groceries and considered walking out the door. It was definitely the smarter and less risky thing to do, considering that it was creepy that he knew what grocery store Izuku went to on Wednesdays, but he was curious. The figure had gone out of his way to pay for him and he hadn't done anything actively malicious towards him. Izuku hesitantly walked over and sat down next to the figure. After sitting there silently for a bit, Izuku considered just walking away before the figure turned slightly towards him. What do you have there? He spoke in an unnerving voice while pointing at his groceries. Some fruits and vegetables my mom wanted me to get. Izuku hesitated before continuing. Who are you and why are you stalking me? The figure chuckled. Stalking you? Is that what you thought I was doing? No, I was just watching you clean up the beach. It's really needed cleanup for a while, so I kept meaning to thank you. I'm just kind of awkward and didn't know how to approach you. Izuku stared at him. Did he really think he was stupid enough to believe an excuse like that? For now he'd play along and try and find out more about this guy. Before he could get out a word, the figure offered a gloved hand with 2 fingers cut out. It was unnerving how similar they were to his. Either way, it's nice to meet you. My name is Arakashig. What's yours, oh great beach cleaner? He said teasingly. Izuku felt more bad vibes the longer he talked to this guy. His tone felt fake and his words felt very practiced. The name was almost certainly either foreign or fake, and considering the perfect Japanese he was speaking, it was most likely the later. Izuku hesitantly reached out with his own gloved hand and shook. My name is Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you, Izuku. Do you have some time to just chat? Izuku hesitated. The smart thing to do would be to say he had to leave now and walk home, but he was curious about what the man wanted. He should make preparations in case he did kidnap him or something though. Sure, just let me text my mom. Holding the phone close to him, but not close enough to R's suspicion, he activated a timed message with the location of the grocery store and a rough description of the hooded man. If he didn't cancel it in 90 minutes, it would send to his mother. Alright, let's talk. Izuku walked away from the store towards home, not sure how to feel. He and Arakishige had talked for a while. They talked about games, manga, politics, and a few other things. Nothing suspicious, just an everyday, normal conversation. Just before he left, however, Arakishige had told him that he would be there every Wednesday to talk if Izuku wanted to. On one hand, the figure he talked to was untrustworthy at best. His name was obviously fake, his excuse was unlikely at best, and his outfit was clearly trying to hide something. On the other hand, he hadn't really done anything wrong. He hadn't asked for his address, he hadn't asked for personal information, and he definitely didn't seem to know much about him. If he was a kidnapper or Pefli, he was one of the worst he'd ever heard of. Then there was his offer to talk more. It was either legitimate or a way for Arakishige to trap him some other time. Against his better judgment, he was considering it. The thing is that he lacked friends. People rarely ever talked to him due to his odd appearance and scary quirk. The only people he talked to on a consistent basis were his mom, his dad, and All Might. While it wasn't bad to talk to them, his dad was rarely around, his mom was paranoia incarnate, and All Might was more of a mentor than a friend. His conversation with Arakishige was the first real casual conversation with someone he'd had in a long time. It was nice. Did that mean he trusted him? No, he was definitely still suspicious of him. But would he talk to him again? Probably. Besides, Izuku thought to himself as he cancelled the timed message. I can take precautions. It had been 8 weeks since his first conversation with Izuku. Just as he'd hoped, the kid had come back every subsequent Wednesday to talk to him. While the kid was obviously still suspicious of him, he seemed to crave the conversations they had. To an extent, he enjoyed them too. Shigaraki was very lonely as a child. He'd never really had a real friend before. It was always training or video games. In his conversations with Izuku, he was able to just enjoy sitting next to him and talking. It was refreshing, to say the least. Through his conversations, he had gradually gotten more and more about Izuku himself, and what he learned fascinated him. He learned about Izuku's fascination with heroes and his fanatical, yet impressive, analysis of them. He learned about his kind and self-sacrificial nature that was completely different to his own. He learned about his self-doubts and training. It was fascinating, like a particularly well-developed NPC. He had, of course, avoided letting Izuku know anything in particular about his private life, at worst giving him very vague impressions. He was sitting on the bench as usual when Izuku came up to him as normal and sat on the bench. Something was off. Izuku had avoided putting pressure on his left arm while sitting down and was continuously rubbing it. Did you hurt your arm or something, kid? Shigaraki asked in a monotone voice. Startled, Izuku looked back down and sighed. Yeah, it's just from a bully from my school. He's scared of me because of my quirk and torment me because of it. Shigaraki was intrigued. This is the first time Izuku had mentioned this quirk. He had kept meaning to figure out more about Izuku's family and quirk during their conversations to learn more about why he looked so similar to him, but he'd never been able to figure out how to do it naturally. Now's my chance. That reminds me, what is your quirk anyway, Izuku? Izuku blinked for a second, before sighing and holding out his hand. Do you have anything you don't mind losing? Shigaraki reached in his pocket and pulled out a pencil he kept in his pocket in the occasion that he would need it and handed it to Izuku. Izuku took it from his hand before hesitantly taking his left glove off. He then reached forward and grasped the pencil with the tips of his fingers, turning it to dust in seconds. Shigaraki stared gobsmacked as Izuku put his glove back on. How did he have the exact same quirk as him? There was no way. The chance of meeting someone with a similar appearance to him and the same quirk was astronomical. Izuku saw his stare and looked downtrodden. I knew you'd be scared of it. Izuku mumbled to himself. Shaking off the shock of what he'd just seen, Shigaraki quickly thought of what he could do to rectify his mistake. You misunderstand. I'm not scared of your quirk, I'm in awe of it. It seems like a powerful quirk for anyone who wants to be a hero. Shigaraki forced the last words out of his mouth. Can you explain how it works? As Izuku droned on about how his quirk worked, Shigaraki stared and thought about the implications. He knew that his parents were dead by the time he was 5, so it was impossible that they had another kid. Did his father have a brother or sister perhaps? If he did, he never talked about them. He'd have to figure it out on his own. Shigaraki stared back down at the kid. Congratulations, kid. You just became even more interesting. Izuku stood at the edge of the beach 2 weeks before the exam. He had done it. He had overcome All Might's plan. Laughing, he fell backwards into the arms of All Might behind him. I did it, All Might. I beat your test. All Might chuckled down at the exhausted teenager. Yeah, you did. In fact, I think you went even further beyond what I originally thought you would do. You truly surpassed my every expectation, young Izuku. It is time for your reward. Izuku stood up and turned to All Might. All Might reached up and picked a lock of hair, before holding it out to Izuku. Eat this. Izuku stared for a second. What the actual F-dashed? Izuku had spent the last 2 weeks with All Might going over the theory of one for all and how it worked. After a disastrous first attempt. Cool, I didn't know my arms could bend that way. They can't. Oh. I think you should take me to a doctor. He had learned how to summon one for all and use it. Of course, he still broke his bones every time he used it, but it was a start. He stood in front of UA, ready to take on his first real test towards becoming a hero. Now, for his first step to becoming a hero. He tripped and started falling face first to the ground. I hate the universe. Just before he hit the ground, he felt himself stop falling. He then feels himself being pulled up and set on his feet. Confused, Izuku turned around to see an odd sight. A girl who was only slightly taller than him. She was moderately pretty with short brown hair, 2 seemingly permanent blush marks on her cheeks, and a kind face. Sorry for not asking your permission to use my quirk, but I figured you wouldn't mind. Izuku blinked. This was an awkward situation. Pretty girls usually avoided him like the plague. He hadn't had one talk to him willingly in years. Well, either way, good luck on the exam today. She yelled excitedly as she ran into the building. Izuku was suddenly reminded of why he was here and ran in after her. The inside of the auditorium was packed. He looked around for a seat and found one empty one. Next to Katsuki. He sighed and moved over to the seat before sitting down next to the glaring Katsuki. He really didn't have another option. Suddenly the stage in the front of the auditorium lit up, revealing a tall blonde man with speakers on his shoulders. What is up, participants? Thanks for coming today. Can I get a woohoo? Izuku leapt up and yelled woohoo at the top of his lungs, only to realize no one else had. Well, this is awkward. Huh, tough crowd. Present Mike muttered to himself. Well, either way, let me explain the exam to you. After a brief explanation of the exam, Present Mike asked for questions. One examinee stood up and got his attention. He was a large teen with blue-black hair, glasses, and what looked to be engines on his legs. He made motions with his hand as he clarified a few parts of the test. Izuku wasn't really paying attention until he pointed at him. And you with the hoodie on. Your response earlier to present Mick's clearly rhetorical statement was distracting. If you're not going to take this seriously, you should just leave. Izuku felt a surge of anger. Who did this arrogant jackass think he is, calling him out for a mistake in front of this whole auditorium? Before he could respond, however, Present Mike regained the teen's attention and continued talking. Izuku stood in front of the gate to the exam. This was it. This was his chance to prove himself. Removing his gloves, he got into position and got ready to go in. He hated using his quirk, but he really didn't have a choice in this scenario. He would have to use everything he had to pass the exam. Suddenly, he felt a hand clasp his shoulder from behind. Startled and terrified, he pushed backwards with his elbows and turned around. Behind him was the same teen from the exam room. They stared at each other for a second before the teen cleared his throat and stood up taller. I would like you to know that you don't seem like hero material. Your surprise at being clasped on the shoulder shows your lack of DSP. Izuku turned around before responding. You're not the only one who thinks that, jackass, but I'm here to prove all of them wrong. The teen was appalled at the language and moved to reprimand him, when Izuku stopped him by turning around and glaring. And for the record, don't surprise me when my gloves are off. I could very easily kill you accidentally. Izuku turned around to the gates, suddenly opening. Not willing to lose a chance to gain an advantage, he ran through as quickly as he could and got started before the stream of people that came in after him. Izuku leapt at the first three-pointer he saw, quickly turning its upper half to dust. That's odd. Izuku thought to himself. My quirk seems a lot more powerful than the last time I used it. He didn't have any time to think about it as he started running from robot to robot, scoring many points. Suddenly he saw a blonde-haired foreign teen trip as a large piece of debris fell down towards him. Moving quickly, he moved over the teen and held his hand out towards the debris. The second the debris made contact, it turned to dust. Nodding down at the shocked teen, he moved on to the next robot. The teachers of UA sat around, looking at the examination through their cameras. We've got a lot of lively recruits this year, don't we? A woman in a skin-tight suit and Diaminorex outfit stated seductively. Yes, we do. Please curb your tendencies this time, Midnight. We don't need a repeat of last year. A tired-looking man with scruffy long hair let out. It was one time. Everyone was there. Present Mike yelled. Now, my friends, we need to focus. Who is going above and beyond this year? A white animal of some kind stated. A tanned shirtless man turned the TV screens to focus on 5 participants that were currently dominating the competition. The 5 participants were made up of a blonde teen shooting explosions through everything that moved, a green-haired teen who seemed to be running very fast from robot to robot, turning each one to dust, a bird-headed teen with what appeared to be a living shadow destroying the robots around it, a girl with vines for hair blocking a robot's attack, and a buff teen with blue-black hair kicking the robots into bits. Interesting. Think it's time. Higuri, release the Kraken. Everyone sat in silence. Higuri. Never call it that again. Izuku was doing great so far. He'd scored a total of 40 points so far, putting him well on track to passing. He probably could have gotten more if it wasn't for his constant need to save people. Seriously, this exam seemed way more dangerous than it should be. Almost as if the universe was laughing at him, he suddenly saw people running past him screaming. He turned around to see a giant robot the size of an office building. Isn't that a little extreme? He turned around to run like everyone else, when he heard a sharp yelp of pain behind him. It was the girl from before, and her foot appeared to be stuck under debris. He knew he should run away. He knew that she probably wasn't in any real danger. He knew that she would be fine. But she looked so scared. She looked so utterly terrified. What kind of hero would he be if he ignored her? He ran forward and dissolved the debris on top her leg. Can you move? The girl was barely able to shake her head no in her shock. Damn it, he thought. I don't have time to put on my gloves. He looked up at the robot. Last resort time. He charged one for all into his legs and leapt into the air. I didn't know that my legs could bend like that. They can't. Oh. I think you should call a doctor. My everything hurts. After being fixed by recovery girl, who it turned out was the school nurse, he had arrived at home as usual. His mom refused to talk to him as he went to his room, still seemingly mad about the fact that he went against her wishes and got his dad to sign the forms when he had been home a few months ago. He didn't mind, he'd proven himself to all might and he'd scored more than enough to pass the exam. It didn't change the fact that everything hurt though. It was a week later. His mom, having seemingly calmed down, gave him his letter from UA and told him to open it. He opened the thing to find a device that suddenly blinked to life. Hello, young Midoria, I am here as a projection. The projection of All Might stated. After talking for a minute about how proud he was of him, the projection All Might waved his arms towards some edited-in scores. As you can see here, you were one of the few to score perfectly on the written exam. This is rare, with only a few people per year scoring this well. Izuku nodded to himself. He had honestly expected way worse, and he had finished far before everyone else. As you can see, you also scored 40 villain points on the physical portion, more than enough to pass the exam. Izuku pumped his fist and let out a joyful hoot. Before he could celebrate, however, the All Might on the projector continued talking. But wait, there's more. Not only did you save multiple examinees from minor injuries throughout the battle, but you also went above and beyond to destroy the zero-pointer to save a hurt girl. For this, we awarded you a combined total of 85 rescue points, giving you a total score of 125 points. The fourth highest in the history of the exam. The only 3 to ever surpass that total were Endeavor, Best Genist, and yours truly. Congratulations, Midoria, UA is your hero academia. Hisashi was getting out of the shower when his phone started ringing. He picked it up and rolled his eyes. It was his boss again. He was sick of the man calling to complain that he hadn't finished his assignment yet. I'd like to see if he could finish this faster than me, Hisashi thought to himself. Sighing in exasperation, he pressed the answer button and raised the phone to his ear. Hello. Hisashi mumbled into the phone. Oh, did I wake you up? I forgot that time zones are different in France. If you're tired, I can call you in a couple hours. His boss's cynical and laid-back voice echoes back. He always called him early in the morning when he should be asleep. Hisashi had always thought that his boss was messing with him, but he could never be sure. No, I just got finished for the night and took a shower. What is it? That can wait. How is your assignment going? Hisashi snorted. This fucker was probably going to complain a bit before he got to the point. I'm about halfway finished here. I'll be moving on to the next section soon. Excellent. Hisashi blinked in surprise. His boss never complimented him. What was going on here? Why are you calling me? Nothing too important, just a reassignment to a new location. Hisashi groaned. So that's why he'd been buttering him up. He was reassigning him again. Where is it this time? I think you'll like your new assignment, considering it's in Mizudafu, Japan, and its surrounding district. His boss said in an uncharacteristically happy tone. Hisashi stood there in shock. He was being reassigned to his home. Thank you so much, boss. Though, why are you sending me there? I've requested to be reassigned there multiple times. Hisashi asked cautiously. His boss laughed. Always the cautious one, aren't you, Hisashi? Can't you believe that your boss just wants to be a nice guy for once? No. His boss laughed even harder. Well, you're right. There's a couple of possible new recruits we were considering in the city. You have one of the highest success rates when it comes to recruiting. We've also been getting reports of multi-quirked organisms popping up recently. Hisashi's blood ran cold. Is it him? We believe so. Inko was having that nightmare again. She was crying out for her mother not to die. She was crying out for her mother not to leave her. She was crying out for anyone to help. He couldn't let her go on like this. Shaking himself, Hisashi looked down at his free hand and realized he had clenched it hard enough to draw a small amount of blood. Send me the list. Hisashi heard a ding come from his phone and opened up the list. Everything seemed to be ordinary until he got to the last name on the list. Why is Stain on here? His boss got uncharacteristically quiet. We believe he would make for a great expendable pawn against all for one's minions. He's also been a big nuisance ever since his debut. We'd like to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But he's an insane psychotic killer who's murdered many heroes for not meeting his stupidly high standards. That does not change the fact that it speaks highly of his skills. Based on the reports, I'd even say his fighting style is similar to yours. Besides, you have the collar. Attached to him if he's too unruly to control. It wouldn't exactly be a big loss to the world if he died. Hisashi felt conflicted. On one hand, his boss was right. Stain was a threat to himself and everyone and around him. Frankly, the world would be better off with him dead or captured. Why not use him as a pawn? On the other hand, the collar was dehumanizing. It made people listen to him under the threat of death. It implied that they didn't deserve a second chance, that they were too far gone. Didn't everyone deserve a second chance? All right, I'll do it. Are there any heroes you want me to check out? If you're asking me if you should recruit your ex-boyfriend, then no. His boss said in a teasing tone. Enji was never my dash. I'm kidding, Hisashi. Geez, it's like you can't even take a joke. Hisashi burned with anger. His boss knew how sore of a spot Enji was to him and loved to rub it in. Fine, but who's replacing me here? I'm nearly done and I don't want to give someone a job they can't finish. I presume Doll will be a good enough replacement? Hisashi shuddered. Yes, as long as I don't have to interact with that creepy a-hole. Good, I will call you with more details later. Hisashi hung up and smiled. He could finally go home and see Inko and his little Izuku again. It may have only been a few months since his last visit, but he was excited to see them again. Then he remembered what his boss said about the chance of him being back. He couldn't let Inko go through that again. He would do anything for her. He pulled his katana out of the sheath on the wall and started sharpening it. Anything. Katsuki walked outside of the principal's office with Deku, seething in anger. How dare this villainous bastard get accepted into UA? He was nothing but a trial for Katsuki to overcome. This fucker had humiliated him twice already, and now he wanted to ruin his backstory too. Once they were far enough away, Katsuki grabbed Deku and slammed him against the lockers. What the F do you think you're doing, you villainous sheet? You're ruining my backstory. Deku stood there the same as usual, but he looked different somehow. He looked so much more confident. Deku reached out with his hand and hesitantly gripped Katsuki's upper arm. Katsuki, let go of me. His voice was so calm and relaxed, mocking Katsuki like he wasn't even a threat. Katsuki clenched his teeth and let go. The fucker's hand creeped him out. Why are you going to UA, shitty Deku? Izuku calmly took a breath, before looking him dead in the eyes. I just want to save people, Katsuki. That's the duty of a hero after all. Katsuki sneered. The duty of a hero is defeat as many villains as possible. Saving people is a job for the extras on the sidelines. Izuku gave him a deadpan look. Katsuki, who do you think has the highest number of resolved cases? Katsuki snorted. What kind of question is that? Obviously, it has to be All Might. Izuku shook his head. No, Endeavor currently holds that record. All Might is the #1 hero due to his ability to both help and beat down those weaker than him. Izuku started walking back towards class before pausing and turning around. From my point of view, you're only good for one of those things. Katsuki stared at his back as he walked away. Izuku walked into the kitchen to find his mother had already finished breakfast. He hesitantly sat down at the table across from her. She was reading a newspaper, with the headline talking about a recent team-up between Ingenium and two vigilantes named Crawler and Popstep. Izuku hesitantly ate his breakfast in silence. Izuku. His mother suddenly broke the silence with, "Why is Mom?" She put the newspaper down and sighed. I know I've been hard on you these past couple months. I'm just so afraid of you getting hurt or attracting too much attention. I just want what's best for you, sweetie. She looked so downtrodden and regretful. He couldn't allow her to feel that way. It's fine, Mom. I understand how you feel. It's just, this is my dream. This is what I've always wanted. I just want to help people, Mom, and I would hate myself forever if I let others suffer and did nothing about it. She sighed. I understand, sweetie. I still feel upset that you went against my wishes, and I still don't want you to do this, but I just want you to know that I'm proud of you. Izuku got up and hugged her. I love you, Mom. She hugged him back. I love you too. Izuku stood hesitantly outside of his new classroom. It felt unreal that he was here. Did he even really deserve to be here? Hopefully, Katsuki and that a-hole from the exam weren't in here. He opened the door. Get your feet off that desk. The a-hole from the exam exclaimed to Katsuki. Does the universe just hate me? The teen suddenly looked over and started walking towards him. By the time he processed that the a-hole was walking towards him, he had already reached him. Suddenly, the teen bowed in front of him. I apologize for my rudeness during the exam. You figured out the true nature of the exam. You are truly the superior hero. The true nature of the exam? What was he talking abo? Oh, he meant the rescue points. Izuku rubbed his head. I didn't know about the rescue points if that's what you're talking about. I just wanted to help people. Ida looked up in shock. You didn't even know about the true nature of the exam and you help people? That makes you even more of a superior hero to me. Please accept my most sincere apologies. This guy was very forward. Izuku didn't really know how to respond to him. As he was considering his response, he heard the door open behind him. Hey, you're that weird guy from the exam. Izuku turned around to see the girl he saved during the exam. Hi. You were so cool destroying that zero-pointer. You were all like dash. Why was she talking to him? Did she think that she owed him or something? As she continued describing her perspective of his fight against the zero-pointer, he continued standing there not really knowing what to do. He wasn't really good at conversation. The only people he talked to consistently were his mother, his father, and Arakishik. As he looked up to speak, he suddenly saw what looked like a yellow caterpillar behind the girl. He blinked. The girl turned around to see what he was looking at and stared as well. Go somewhere else if you want to play at being friends. This is the hero course. Who are you? Izuku asked in confusion. The caterpillar got up and unzipped what he now realized was a sleeping bag. He walked past them and sat down at the desk in front of the room. Everyone, please take a seat. 3 of them rushed into the nearest seat. Hello, my name is Shota Aizawa. I may or may not be your teacher here. Izuku thought back to his journal. Every teacher at UA was a hero or former hero, so he most likely had an entry on him in his journal. Shota Aizawa, also known as Eraserhead. Emitter-type quirk. Erasure. It allows him to nullify any transformation or emitter-type quirks within his sight. Not much is known about him due to his lack of media attention. Weaknesses. His quirk is based on what he can see, so his eyes are an obvious weak point. His glasses are most likely durable, but they would still be the best target overall. Aizawa threw some clothes on the floor in front of him. Put these on, we're going to do a quirk apprehension test outside. The brown-haired girl raised her hand. Yes. Opening ceremonies are today, sir. Shouldn't we be heading to them? Aizawa snorted. They're a waste of time. Now hurry up before I decide to expel you for wasting my time. The class chatted among themselves as they waited for Aizawa at the PE grounds. Izuku continued listening to the large teen and the brown-haired girl talk to him and himself. He kept trying to remember how to properly interact with a girl. Oh yeah, his dad had told him what to do before. Remember, son, if a pretty girl or boy ever tries to talk to you, run to me and point me in their direction. I'll take care of the problem. That didn't sound right. Oh wait, he had talked about it another time too. If a girl, or boy for that matter, ever tries to flirt with you, my precious son, I'll cut them into pieces and burn them to ash with my fire breath. Maybe his dad was more screwed up than his mom. What do you think? I actually don't think we've exchanged names, have we? The brown-haired girl said. Izuku realized with surprise that they hadn't. My name is Izuku Midoriya. The girl smiled. Hi Izuku, my name is Ochako Uraraka. My name is Tenya Ida. The large teen stated. Izuku smiled. Before he could attempt to continue talking to them, he saw Eraserhead walking towards the class out of the corner of his eye and straightened up, with the rest of the class following suit. Aizawa stood in front of them with an uninterested expression. Today you will be performing a quirk apprehension test. In this test, you will be performing a normal middle school physical exam, except now you'll be able to use your quirks. Izuku Midoriya, please step forward. Izuku perked up and walked forward to the podium, ignoring the hateful gaze he felt from Katsuki off to the side. What would you like me to do, Eraserhead-sensei? Aizawa looked surprised for a second before narrowing his gaze at Izuku. How did you know who I am? I have a habit of studying different heroes for fun in my free time. Aizawa grunted. Whatever, just call me sensei. Please step up on the diamond and hold this baseball in your hand. Aizawa tossed him the ball, and he caught it in his gloved right hand. Aizawa suddenly squinted down at him again and made a stopping motion with his hand. Why are you wearing gloves? They are not part of the standard UA uniform. Izuku blinked in surprise. Did you not get my special accommodation forms, sensei? I sent them in about a week ago. No, I did not. Whatever, we'll confirm it after the test. Aizawa made a dismissive sign to continue. Izuku walked up to the plate and stretched a bit. What was your record for the ball throw in middle school, kid? About 80 or so meters, sensei. Aizawa shook his head in approval. Impressive distance without a quirk, but this time I'd like you to try utilizing it with your quirk. Well, with all due respect, sir, I don't think my quirk is suited for this. Aizawa looked back disinterested. I saw it during the entrance exam screening. I was asleep about half of it, but I caught the part where you destroyed the zero-pointer with a single punch. I also noticed you turning many robots into dust with your strength. I did do both of those things, sir, but my quirk is weird. Well, Izuku thought to himself. Time to use this stupid cover story. I have one of those weird quirk mutations where I develop two seemingly unrelated quirks. It's only been documented a few times, but my grandmother happens to be one of them. Izuku heard some of his classmates muttering behind him along with what sounded like an explosion. Aizawa looked shocked for a second before his face returned back to a neutral look. I don't care, just use one of your quirks to attempt this. One of my quirks would just turn the baseball to dust, and the other would probably pulverize my arm. Aizawa sighed. Use one of them to get a score above 200 meters or I'll expel you. Izuku looked up in surprise. How could he do this? His normal physical strength wouldn't work here. Pulling his arm back, he focused on his quirk. All right, Izuku thought. Plan B it is. Ochako stood off to the side watching Izuku focus intensely. She felt this was unfair. So what if his quirks were unsuited to this? He was still a heroic guy with a quirks much more powerful than hers. Suddenly, he tensed up and threw his arm forward. Immediately, everyone was pushed back from the sheer power of the throw. It was like a hurricane had suddenly appeared with Izuku at the epicenter. She covered her eyes to block the sand that sprouted up from the shockwave. When she uncovered her eyes, she saw the ball still flying through the air. She turned back to look at Aizawa, whose eyes seemed glued to his phone. A few seconds later, she heard a ding come from his phone to indicate the final distance. Aizawa stared at the screen for a second longer before looking up toward the now expectant Izuku, who was rubbing his pointer finger. Aizawa's face morphed into an unpleasant smile. Midoriya Izuku, 800.3 meters. Everyone stood in dead silence for a minute before Izuku raised his hand. Yes, Midoriya? Can I go to the nurse? I broke my pointer finger. Go to the nurse before the end of this exercise and I'll expel you. Izuku stared for a second. That sounds highly illegal. Aizawa sighed. Hurry up at least. All right. Now that Midoriya is back, we will begin. A red-haired kid in the back pumped his fist. Woohoo, this sounds like fun. Aizawa suddenly felt ticked off. New change of plans, whoever scores last will be expelled. He heard the starts of protests from the students before he raised his hand to silence them. Heroics isn't about fun, it's about going out of your way to do what's best for everyone around you. In essence, it's to go past your limits to help others. The hero world is unfair, so get used to it. He could practically feel the students fire up in determination. Now go out there, and go plus ultra to show me why you should be allowed to stay. Mineta was scared. He had been doing the worst in each test so far, falling way behind the other guys and the bodacious women. He couldn't be expelled yet. He hadn't even copped a feel yet. The class was moving over towards the repeated sidesteps area when he suddenly felt a tap on the shoulder. He turned to see the Izuku kid from earlier staring down at him in mild concern. Your name's Mineta, right? Mineta was surprised that he was paying enough attention to know his name. What do you need? Izuku glanced over at the distracted Aizawa, before turning his head back to Mineta. Quite frankly, you're going to get expelled if you don't do anything to impress the teacher over there. He's not lying about the expulsion, but if you do something to impress him you could change his mind. Mineta was shocked. This powerhouse was trying to help him. Why are you helping me? I'm your competitor. Izuku smiled slightly in a way that was both kind of creepy and adorable. Like a puppy covered in blood. 2 reasons. The first is that a hero should help anyone in need, regardless of who they are or what the situation is. The second is that no one here really deserves to go home early. We all work to get here, and we should at least get a chance to prove ourselves. Mineta felt shock and admiration. This guy was so cool. He was willing to go out of his way to help someone with a weaker quirk like his prove their worth. Alright, so what's the plan? Explain your quirk to me. Aizawa was impressed so far with his students. All of them had displayed some level of potential, some of them had massive amounts of it, except for one. Aizawa looked over at the small purple boy who was getting ready to perform the repeated sidesteps test. So far, he had been failing terribly. He had scored last in long jump, 50-meter dash, and grip strength. Frankly, it looked like he would easily be in last place. Aizawa sighed. It was a shame that people like him came into heroics programs. People with decent quirks, but too poor physical ability and skill to use them. Begin. Mineta quickly threw the ball on top of his heads on either side of the lines. He continued until there was a pile on either side bigger than him. Mineta ran into one and started quickly going back and forth at an incredibly fast rate. When the timer stopped, he had scored by far the most out of any student on the repeated side jumps. Aizawa stared for a minute before his mouth returned to an unpleasant grin. How unexpected, he thought. Mineta ran over to Izuku as soon as the next person started and offered him a fist bump. Izuku stared for a second, seeming confused on what to do. What are you doing? Offering you a fist bump, of course. You really helped me out there, dude. Izuku hesitated. What is a fist bump? Mineta felt simultaneous shock and disbelief. Are you telling me no one had ever offered you a fist bump before? Izuku nodded his head. Yeah, I kind of only have one friend. Mineta was surprised. This dude was awesome. Who wouldn't want to be his friend? Mineta smiled at him. I'll be your friend. Izuku stared at him for a minute before grinning in a way that was somehow both creepy and cute again. Thanks. Now, do you think you can teach me how to cop a feel without getting hurt? Izuku gave him a deadpan expression before slapping him upside the head. That's weird, dude. Aizawa watched as everyone stood with bated breaths as he pulled up the scores from the exam. He snorted. They were worrying for nothing. He had already decided not to expel all of them. They had all proven they had at least some potential. He pressed the button to show the total rankings. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu. 2. Shoto Todoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugu. 4. Tenya Ida. 5. Izuku Midoriya. 6. Fumikage Tokoyami. 7. Mizo Shoji. 8. Mishiro Ojiro. 9. Ejiru Kirishima. 10. Mina Ishido. 11. Ochako Uraraka. 12. Kudakuji. 13. Rikido Sato. 14. Tsuyu Azui. 15. Yuga Oyama. 16. Hantasiro. 17. Denki Kaminari. 18. Kyokujiro. 19. Toru Hagakure. 20. Minoru Mineta. Mineta looked down in misery as he saw his ranking. Also, I lied about the expulsion thing. Everyone looked up in surprise at his lie. It was merely a logical ruse to bring out your full potential. As he listened to everyone complain and whine, he sighed. He was surprised by this year's class. Every one of them showed potential and he was looking forward to the rest of the year. Now hurry up and pack your things, class is dismissed for the day. Izuku stood outside the principal's office. After saying goodbye to Uraraka, Mineta, and Ida, he had gone up to Aizawa-sensei and asked for a copy of his classmates' quirks from the quirk database. After a moment of surprise, he had directed Izuku to the principal's office. What he was asking for was illegal, but not strictly enforced. As he was considering leaving, the door finally swung open and he walked inside. At a desk was some strange rat creature with a massive scar over his left eye. Nizu. Mutant-type quirk, high-spec. It grants Nizu large amounts of intelligence as well as altering his biology to be able to speak, think, and act like a human. Weakness, extremely vulnerable to physical attacks due to his small size. Hello, Mr. Midoriya, what can I do for you today? Izuku hesitated before pulling his journal out of his bag. I have a habit of studying villains and heroes in my free time. It's something I enjoy doing and I'd like to do it with my classmates. Nizu looked surprised before holding out his hand for Izuku's notebook. Midoriya handed the notebook to him and was surprised to see him skim through the entire book at an incredibly fast pace. Nizu held out the notebook towards him while nodding. "This is quite impressive, Mr. Midoriya. The detail is astonishing and the inferences are shockingly accurate for what little you had to work with. I'm honestly impressed." Izuku blushed at the high praise. "As for your request, I can't just let you take files on your classmates out of school. The possible ramifications if someone unsavory found them are devastating." Izuku looked down in sadness. "But that does not mean that I can't let you look at them here." Izuku looked up in surprise. "As long as you keep your analysis notebook and class files here, I'd be willing to give you files of the whole school to analyze. After all, it is my job as an educator to help children build their skills." Izuku smiled and pumped his fist. "Are we in agreement? I believe that would work for me, sir." "Good, now go home." As Izuku left, Nizu smiled. It seemed that he had finally found someone with an intellect he could hone. The notes were good, but they needed improvement. If he trained the boy well enough, he may even rival his father. Izuku walked out and was surprised to find Mineta, Uraraka, and Ida waiting for him. "Why are you guys still here?" Uraraka giggled. "We were waiting for you, silly." Izuku stood there for a moment, considering the possibilities. Did they feel that they owed him somehow? Mineta had said he wanted to be his friend, but he wasn't fully convinced. Uraraka could feel like she owed him for his rescue of her during the entrance exam, but he had no idea why Ida would feel some obligation to him. Why? The three of them stared at him in confusion. "Why are you being so nice to me? People usually avoid me like the plague, so I'm wondering why you're being so nice to me." The three of them exchanged glances before turning their eyes back to him. "Well, we kind of want to be your friends. You just seem like a nice guy. If you don't want us to be, it's perfectly fine." Uraraka responded while rubbing her head. Izuku stared for a second before smiling. "I'd love to be your friends." Uraraka smiled, Mineta pumped his fist, and Ida grinned slightly. They started walking towards the train station together, with Uraraka and Mineta doing most of the talking. Izuku still felt confused but enjoyed the company. It felt more pleasant and warm than his talks with Arakishig. He could get used to this. Kurojairi watched as Shigaraki swept away the remains of another possible recruit who had offended him. The possible recruit had made the mistake of insulting Shigaraki's gloves. He had called him a beach for needing to wear gloves in such warm weather. Shigaraki had promptly disintegrated the idiot. Incidents like this were common but strangely had become rarer over the past couple of months. Kojairi had noticed Shigaraki's absences and unusually pleasant moods these past couple months. He always seemed to be less ticked off than usual, and even seemed happy to an extent. He had reported it to Sensei, but they had both mutually agreed to not investigate for the time being. Whatever Shigaraki was doing, it was making him more agreeable and appealing to the recruits that had come in due to rumors of their planned attacks against All Might. Speaking of Sensei, Kurojairi remembered that he was supposed to teleport Shigaraki to him in a few minutes. "Shigaraki, it's almost time to go meet up with Sensei." Shigaraki perked up and dropped the broom, before rushing over to Kurojairi in excitement. "Finish cleaning your mess first." Shigaraki grumbled about stupid cannon fodder and their insults as he walked over to the fallen broom and continued sweeping. Shigaraki was excited. It had been months since his last visit with Sensei. He always claimed he was busy with something, so he was excited to finally see him again. Kurojairi warped them through to Sensei's room. Against the wall, Sensei sat with his helmet on. "Shigaraki," Sensei began. "I'm glad to see you in good health. What about you, Sensei? Are you feeling any better?" Sensei sighed, releasing a burst of steam from his helmet. "Unfortunately, no. My body has been getting weaker recently, if anything." Shigaraki felt a twinge of pain. He couldn't lose Sensei, he was like a father to him. Before he could continue, Sensei held up his hand. "Enough about me, how is your plan shaping up to kill All Might?" Shigaraki hesitated before continuing. "We currently are planning to break into the school soon and retrieve a schedule of when and where All Might will be. We plan to use the media as a distraction." Sensei let out a metallic hum. What about your plan to kill All Might? He may not look it, but he is rather intelligent. Shigaraki grinned darkly. We're planning to distract him with the cannon fodder we're recruiting. While they distract him, Kurogiri will warp my hand onto his weak spot. After that, we'll let my quirk finish him off. A fine plan indeed, but one full of holes. Shigaraki blinked in confusion. None of the fodder you and Kurogiri gathered will even last a few seconds against All Might. He should be able to just dash through them straight to you. What would you change then, Sensei? Shigaraki felt an aura of amusement radiate of Sensei before he brought a hand up and pressed a button on his helmet. Dr. Tsubasa, would you kindly send the Nomu in? Suddenly, the doors behind them burst open. What stepped out was a hideous black creature with black skin, an exposed brain, and a bird-like beak. Sensei gestured towards it. This is Nomu 1DS1, a human eye modified to create a perfect counter to All Might. It possesses the quirks of regeneration, shock absorption, and super strength. Am I correct in saying that he will be a satisfactory distraction? Shigaraki grinned at the monstrosity in front of him. He will do nicely. Hisashi pulled the lever on his chair and leaned back in his seat. His boss had managed to secure him a first-class seat to Japan. The guy was an a-hole, but he was an a-hole that could easily secure top-notch amenities for his employees. Hisashi grimaced. Of course, the only reason he'd gotten this seat was as an apology. Hisashi, he's an important asset and informant for our organization that could help you immensely. Hisashi growled. Is that supposed to make me trust that a-hole? Every time I'm around him, I feel like he's going to try and kill me for existing. His boss sighed through the phone. Hisashi, I don't like working with him either. That man is insane, and honestly, we were planning on getting rid of him before he accepted our mandatory offer to join us. I voted to kill him on the spot, but I was ultimately unable to gather enough support. How is that supposed to make me feel better? He could hear his boss's teeth grind through the phone. It's not. What I'm trying to say is that he's our asset, so we might as well use him. There's also the fact that we need you to keep an eye on him. Some rumors have been floating around that may warrant his execution, and we'd like you to confirm if they're true or not. Hisashi punched the wall in front of him as hard as he could, accidentally punching right through it. Don't think I didn't hear that, Hisashi. Stop acting like a petulant child. And just work with me here. You don't get it, do you? I'm going to be near my family. If I screw up, he'll have an excuse to go after them. Hisashi could hear what sounded like talons drumming hard against wood through the phone. You are correct. I had forgotten to consider that. A moment of silence followed. How about this? If at any point you feel like you or your family is in danger, I give you permission to burn the fucker to a crisp. I'll take full responsibility. Hisashi was shocked into silence for a moment. Are you sure you want to go that far for me, boss? It sounds like a risky move for you. I've granted permission for you to do much worse, Hisashi. You're a more valuable asset than he is. Hisashi thought the offer over. Anything else? That I'll throw in a first-class plane ticket as an apology for making you do this. One apology for a hole in the wall later and he was off on his flight. Hisashi sighed. He really didn't want to work with that man, but he really didn't have an option. Besides, he would be taking full advantage of that permission to kill him if he felt like it. I'll put off these thoughts for now. What should I do first when I get back to Japan, though? Hisashi thought to himself. He knew that he hadn't visited Fuyumi and Tuya since they were children, so he should check up on them if possible. Hopefully, they would come alone and not with Enji. Hisashi grimaced. Morally, he knew that he should check up on his former friend and see if he had finally gotten himself some help, but he already knew that Enji hadn't. Hisashi sighed and rubbed the knife hidden in his sleeve to make sure it was still there. He really wanted to help his former friend, but he was scared to see if Enji had fallen even farther without him. The last time they had talked had been the day that he had seen just how far Enji was willing to go to be number one. He was about to surrender Enji. What the hell were you thinking? He was a criminal. It doesn't matter what I do as long as he's taken care of. He was just a kid. Hisashi shook himself out of his delusion and checked surroundings for suspicious activity. Seeing nothing, he looked back down at the knife in his sleeve. Enji had always been a loose cannon. Surely no one would blame him if he stayed away from him. Hisashi looked at his reflection and sighed. He couldn't just do that, however. The longer he avoided talking to him, the more of a threat he would be to himself and others. Well then, Enji, Hisashi thought to himself. I hope I'm wrong about you. Izuku yawned as he leaned his seat back slightly. It was his second day at UA and he felt bored with what they had been doing so far. He knew it was only the second day, but did class introductions have to be so boring? He noticed Ida beside him motioning for him to put his chair back down, and Izuku mumbled as he leaned the chair back forward. Their last class of the day was the ever-important foundational hero studies. All Might was supposed to be teaching it and he hoped to God they would be doing something. I am here, coming through the door like a normal person. Well, that was convenient timing. Izuku thought to himself. Hello class, and welcome to the most important class in UA. This class is known as Foundational Heroic Studies. In this class, I will be teaching you the basics of being a hero. Well, at the very least the introduction is better than the previous teachers. Izuku thought to himself. Enough chit-chat, go to the locker room and put on your costumes. Do not worry about not having received them yet, because they are already hung up for you there. We'll leave for the training ground in 30 minutes. Izuku blinked in surprise. This was not what he'd been expecting, but he would take any reason at this point to get up and move around. Izuku admired the new hero costume he was wearing. It was a simple pitch-black jumpsuit with a black belt, knee-high black boots, and a mouthguard that doubled as a respirator in case of an emergency. An overall great costume for stealth in dark places. The real important piece, however, was the pair of elbow-length gloves on his arms. They were missing the pointer and ring fingers as usual, and they contained a mechanism that would allow him to quickly detach them if needed. His dad was surprisingly very experienced in costume design and had helped him with designing a practical costume that would work with his quirk. It had been quite an interesting experience to learn about how to avoid impracticality and flashiness. Happy with how his costume looked, he turned and looked at his friends. Ida was in an impractically heavy-looking suit of armor, Mineta was in what appeared to be a diaper, and Uraraka was in a skin-tight black and pink suit with a helmet. Izuku stared at his friends' odd costume designs. Did your costumes turn out the way you wanted? They all looked confused at his question, confirming that he was correct. Ida proudly straightened himself. I based my design of my brother's hero costume. It helps guard me against attacks and contains cushioning in case I crash. It may not be as impractical as I thought, but it could still use work. The equipment is heavy and can weigh him down in a fight. Mineta pumped his fist. I based my design of a bowl of grapes to really go with the theme of my quirk. So it's not a diaper. It's still very impractical though. The bowl can be easily gripped by enemies and takes away from his advantage in having a small size. Uraraka rubbed her head. It turned out mostly how I wanted it to, but the costume is a bit tighter than I imagined. It must have been an error with the support department. No, it definitely wasn't. It's very hard to grip a skin-tight suit in the middle of combat. It is also very good at distracting opponents in the middle of combat, like how I feel right now. Izuku shook those thoughts away. Your costumes have multiple impracticalities in them. You know, my dad is really good at redesigning costumes to be more practical. Next time he visits, I'm sure he wouldn't mind taking a look at yours and improving them. All three of them rubbed their heads in what appeared to be embarrassment. Well, that was sort of blunt, Izuku. I'll accept your offer though, Uraraka stated. Before Izuku could continue, he heard All Might talking behind and turned to listen. Today we'll be doing indoor battle training. You will be fighting in a 2 versus 2 style battle. Before I further explain the rules, let's draw lots to determine the teams. Izuku ignored the constant questions from his classmates around him and chuckled at All Might's obvious discomfort. It's quite amusing that his largest challenge as a hero appears to be teaching us. Listen up. Here's the deal. Since you are too impatient to wait until after we draw teams to ask me questions, I'll explain the rules first. All Might pulled out a small sheet of paper. In this exercise, the villain team will be hiding a nuclear weapon and the hero team will be attempting to retrieve it. The heroes After listening to All Might drone about the rules for 10 minutes, All Might finally grabbed a box with the word lots at his side and started drawing names. For the first hero team, we have Izuku Midoriya and Fumikage Tokoyami. Izuku and Tokoyami turned to look at each other appraisingly. Tokoyami was just below average height-wise, being about 8 centimeters taller than him. His bird head on top of his human body was mildly disturbing to look at, but Izuku had seen far worse. His costume was a simple black cloak covering most of his body. It was more practical than most of the other costumes due to its stealthy nature, but it was very easy to grip if someone got in close. Tokoyami walked over and bowed to him. Fate has decided that we shall fight together today. It is a pleasure to meet you. Izuku's sweat dropped at the over-the-top statement while bowing back. It is a pleasure to meet you too. Let's do our best out there. Tokoyami nodded in acknowledgement before turning to watch All Might draw their opponents. As long as it's not Katsuki, I'm all good with this. For the first villain team, we have Katsuki Bakugo and Hanta Zero. I need to stop jinxing myself. Katsuki glared over murderously at the two of them as a plain-looking boy with tape dispensers for elbows walked over towards him. Tokoyami and Izuku stood outside the entrance to the building their fight was taking place in. Tokoyami turned to Izuku. Midoriya, would you care to discuss strategy? Izuku nodded his head affirmatively. Yes. First off, please inform me more about your quirk. Suddenly a black shadow creature appeared from underneath Tokoyami's cape. Izuku yelped and jumped back. Tokoyami rubbed his head in embarrassment. I apologize for not warning you. This is Dark Shadow, my quirk. It is a sentient beast that can materialize and from my body at will. It grows stronger the less light there is. Izuku nodded his head at this information. My quirks are decay and 1 strength. Whatever I touch with all 5 fingers decays to dust outwards from where I touch, and I have super strength that I currently can't control at the moment. Tokoyami looked like he wanted to ask a question but stopped himself as Izuku continued. Your quirk would be nearly useless against Katsuki due to the large amount of light he produces with his quirk. From what I know about Zero, he would be a far easier target for you. Ah, so you do know Bakugo. Izuku looked up in surprise. You referred to him with his first name, indicating that you two know each other well enough. 1. You also seem to know enough about his quirk to know that I would be useless against him. Izuku sighed. Yeah, Katsuki and I were friends a long time ago. We had a bit of a falling out and he hates me with a passion now. Tokoyami nodded in understanding. I know him well, Tokoyami. Izuku stated with a smirk. That's how I know he'll come straight for me. Tokoyami and Izuku ran down the hallway together towards their destination. Suddenly, Katsuki burst out from behind a corner and aimed at them. Izuku pushed both of them out of the way of Katsuki's explosion and nodded towards Tokoyami. Tokoyami nodded back and continued running towards the stairs, leaving Izuku to fend for himself against Katsuki. Deku! Katsuki growled in anger. Don't think I didn't figure out the real meaning of what you said the other day. What the F is he talking about? At first I didn't know what you were saying, but then I realized that you comparing me to Endeavor was a way of telling me that I'll be second to you. What? Endesh? Katsuki slammed his fist against the wall. Don't lie to me, just fight. Katsuki threw a right hook at Izuku, which he easily dodged. Utilizing the momentary advantage, Izuku used Katsuki's momentum to flip him and slam him hard onto the ground. As he watched Katsuki get back up, Izuku felt a momentary twinge of anger. How many times had Katsuki had him in a similar position? How many times had Katsuki hurt him? He should kick him while he's down. He should make him feel all the pain Katsuki had inflicted on him. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The young Izuku cried to himself. But he wouldn't. All he would be doing is proving Katsuki right in his belief that he was villainous. He couldn't blame Katsuki for his fear of him. That was entirely his fault. In his momentary lapse of concentration, he almost took a blast from Katsuki. Dodging the blast, he sent a roundhouse kick straight into Katsuki's gut, knocking him down again. I'm a lot better at martial arts than you, Katsuki. At this distance, your attacks leave you wide open. Katsuki growled and blasted himself up to his feet. Stop looking down on me, you piece of shit. I'm not going to let you humiliate me again. Izuku looked at him in confusion, before dashing away into a nearby hallway. Izuku ran as fast as he could away from Katsuki, ignoring the screams of Deku in the distance. After making sure the coast was clear, he activated the communicator on his ear. Tokoyami, status report. Zero is a lot faster than we thought he would be. He keeps getting out of range of me and Dark Shadow. He keeps using his tape to fly from pillar to pillar before me or Dark Shadow can reach him. The room is also very bright, making my quirk a lot weaker. It seems Bakugo guessed the weakness to my quirk rather accurately, so he picked a location with a lot of light. Izuku nodded his head in thought. Understood, I'm going to head up to your position as soon as possible. Too bad you're never going to make it up there. Katsuki jumped from around the corner and scored a direct hit on the surprised Izuku's side. Gritting his teeth in pain, Izuku rolled away from Katsuki and quickly checked his side. It was very badly burnt, way too badly for a training session. Is he trying to kill me? Katsuki grinned at Izuku maliciously. You know how my quirk ignites my nitroglycerin sweat to create explosions? Izuku hesitantly nodded. Well, if my gauntlet is designed correctly, it's been storing my sweat since I put it on. Izuku's face dawned with realization. He heard All Might screaming through his communicator. Stop, you could kill him. Katsuki grinned before aiming his gauntlet. I don't care. He pulled the pin and Izuku rolled out of the way. A massive explosion shot out of Katsuki's gauntlet and blasted through the building, just grazing Izuku's other side. Izuku stared at the hole in the building behind him. Holy shit, Katsuki is legitimately trying to kill him. Izuku suddenly hissed in pain and looked at his other side. It was burnt even worse than the side Katsuki had already blasted. Ignoring Katsuki talking to All Might, he forced himself around the corner and kept moving as fast he could. He looked at his sides as he forced himself forward. Demon it all, I'm in too bad of a condition to use one for all. I guess that leaves me no choice then. He activated the detaching mechanisms in his gloves. Katsuki noticed the shitty Deku running away and snorted. What a shock, he's as cowardly as all villains were. Of course, fear is to be expected when someone was facing a main character as awesome as him. He casually strolled forward, not in a rush to catch the shitty Deku. This was it. This was his victory over the shitty Deku that had humiliated him so many times. He needed to savor this moment. He turned a corner to see the shitty Deku standing at the end of the corridor with his gloves off. Katsuki stopped. Deku looked terrified. He looked so afraid of him. Almost as if he saw him as a villain. Katsuki shook his head slightly. It didn't matter how scared Deku was, he needed to savor his victory. Deku was the villain of this story anyway. He shouldn't feel any sympathy. Letting his face change into a grin, he walked forward. When he was only about a meter from Deku, the floor collapsed from under him. Barely grabbing himself on the edges, he only timed to look up at Deku's foot as it kicked him hard in the face. Izuku sat down, careful to only rest 3 fingers on the ground, and looked down through the floor at the unconscious Katsuki below. He had anticipated that Katsuki would want to savor defeating him and would attempt to walk towards him. Using this inference, he could plan for a way to surprise Katsuki and take him down while he was off guard. Using his quirk, he had weakened the structure of the floor significantly by barely grazing it with his fingers. With the extra time the trap had bought himself, he had been able to take Katsuki down. It was a desperate gambit, and one that would have failed had he predicted Katsuki's behavior wrong, but he had won with it. He groaned in pain and noticed that his sides looked even worse than before. He didn't have much time. He had to help Tokoyami. He forced himself painfully up the stairs and panted as he reached up and turned on his communicator. Tokoyami, where are you located again? He heard a sigh of relief. Oh Midoriya, I'm glad you're all right. When I felt that massive explosion beneath us, I feared that you had fallen victim to Bakugo. We are located in the main room on the 5th floor. Got it? Be ready to grab the bomb when the floor turns to dust under you. Midoriya turned off the communicator and let out a few more mms of pain as he positioned himself under the room where Tokoyami was located. Screaming painfully as he did so, He leapt up and smashed his hand as hard as he could against the floor. Tokoyami quickly tensed himself in wait for Midoriya's attack. Truthfully, he didn't know what to make of the smaller teen, but he seemed extremely nice and had been far more accepting of Dark Shadow than others. He liked the teen, and he hoped they could be friends in the future. Suddenly he saw the floor turn to dust at the center of the room, quickly expanding outwards. Shiro, not expecting this, fell through the hole and landed on his face, while Tokoyami landed on his feet. Quickly he sent out Dark Shadow, who grabbed the bomb and pulled it towards him. He tapped the bomb, ensuring his victory. Feeling happy with his victory, he turned towards where the floor had started to decay to celebrate with Midoriya. He suddenly stopped. Midoriya was standing, clutching his burnt sides in extreme pain. He looked up at Tokoyami with a smile before falling forward. Quickly, he sent Dark Shadow to grab Izuku before he hit the floor. He looked over Midoriya's burnt, unconscious body and felt a twinge of anger. He hadn't known Midoriya that long, but he seemed like a very kind and accepting guy. This was extreme to do to anyone, much less to him. Midoriya had woken up to his mother screaming about how she should mutilate All Might with her quirk, vividly describing the various organs she would pull out of him and then force-feed him. Noticing he was awake, Inko ran over and rubbed him on the head. "Are you okay, baby? I heard what happened and came as soon as I could." She was talking uncharacteristically soft. She must have been very worried. He looked down at his sides and noticed that they were completely healed, with only barely noticeable burn scars on both of them. He should be now that recovery girl healed him. Izuku looked right and noticed that Aizawa-sensei was in the room, with an expression that looked far grimmer than he usually did. "You were very badly hurt in your fight with Bakugo. The fact that he didn't kill you with his last explosion was a miracle." Izuku's eyes widened. "Bakugo? Is he okay? I roughed him up pretty badly." Aizawa looked at him in confusion. "He could have very easily killed you, and the first thing you do is ask if he's alright. You're either as suicidal as All Might or as selfless as him." Aizawa moved over and sat by his bed with a sigh. "Your mother predicted that you wouldn't want her to press charges, is that correct?" Izuku nodded his head. "It's my fault he hates me anyway. I hurt him by accident and that's why he's afraid of me." He barely heard Aizawa mumble, "Didn't seem that scared to me," before he continued. "Alright then." The teachers reviewed the footage and voted what to do with Bakugo. For now, he's on probation, he will be required to go to therapy, and he will be spending detention with me for the entire year starting next week. Izuku looked up to protest before Aizawa held up his hand to silence him. It was either that or expelling him. I voted for expulsion personally, but Nizu made a convincing argument to the other teachers that he would be dangerous on the street and that it was our job as educators to help him. Aizawa snorted. "What a load of bullshit that is." Aizawa leaned back a bit farther. All Might is also not allowed to do class exercises without a more experienced teacher with him from now on. He should have stopped the match the second Katsuki threatened to use his gauntlet. I was hesitant to let Izuku come here in the first place. I honestly want to take him out of here and sue the school for negligence. His mother finally piped up. She looked down. But I know that he would hate me forever if I took him away for something that wasn't the school's fault. She looked up towards Aizawa with a look promising pain, death, and suffering. I expect you to take better care of him in the future. Promise me you can do this and I'll let him stay. Aizawa stared for a second. I promise that I'll do everything in my power to take better care of him. Izuku walked into class the next day to 2 missiles slamming into him. Midoriya. Uraraka and Mineta let out simultaneously. I can't breathe. The 2 of them let go while profusely apologizing. Ida ran up next and bowed to him. It is great to see that you are all right, Midoriya. Izuku smiled. Thanks, Ida. Suddenly, Tokoyami walked out from behind Ida looking downtrodden. He bowed his head profusely to the ground. I greatly apologize, Midoriya. You were my partner yesterday and I failed you greatly. It is my honor-bound duty to perform any task you ask of me as penance. Izuku smiled. You don't have to do anything for me, Tokoyami, but if I had to ask, I want you to sit by me at lunch with my friends. Tokoyami looked up shocked. I failed you so badly, and you would still have me as your friend? Izuku hesitantly patted his shoulder. It's okay, you did nothing wrong. The plan was mine, and I deserve the blame for what went wrong. Before they could continue, Katsuki walked in behind them. Everybody in the class went dead silent and stared at the teen. He stared at Izuku with murderous intent, looking about ready to blast him, before walking past him and sitting down. Needless to say, no one talked until Aizawa entered the room. After a strangely normal class PRD where they elected a president and vice president, who ended up being Yoerozu and Ida respectively, Izuku sat down for lunch with his friends. It was nice to just enjoy this environment with them, which was the complete opposite of what he was used to. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a teen with white and red hair sitting alone at another lunch table. From what he remembered, he was named Shoto Todoroki, son of Endeavor. His eyes were very cold towards everyone who walked near him, but he looked so lonely. Hesitantly, he waved to get Uraraka's attention and motioned towards Todoroki. Seemingly getting his intention, she smiled back at him and gave him a thumbs up. He walked over and sat down next to Todoroki. Shoto sat down on his own at the lunch table like he was used to. Occasionally, someone came by and asked if they could sit down next to him. They all left after he gave them a glare. It was lonely, but he was used to it. Suddenly, a short teen with green hair slid into the seat next to him and smiled. The two of them awkwardly stared at each other for a minute before Shoto went back to eating. The teen, who he now recognized as Midoria from his class, cleared his throat. Hello there, it's nice to meet you, Todoroki. I noticed you were lonely over here and thought I could keep you compa. Go away. Midoriya looked crestfallen before clearing his throat and trying again. Well, you just looked lonely, so I thought maybe I could talk to you. Go away. Midoriya looked a little ticked off before continuing. Are you sure? I know what it's like to be lon. Go away. Izuku looked like he wanted to continue, before sighing and getting up. He moved to walk back to his table before he stopped momentarily and turned towards him. Well, if you're ever feeling lonely, I'll save a spot for you at my table. With those words, Izuku turned and walked back over to his friends. The kindness in his words made Shoto feel uncomfortable. Katsuki sat alone at lunch, a stark contrast to what he was used to. He knew the reason why, but he didn't care. So what if he was a bit too rough with the shitty Deku? No one had died. Izuku looked so terrified of him. He looked so afraid of him. Almost as if he saw him as a villain. Katsuki shook his head to clear it. Why did that FNG image keep playing in his head? There was no way he felt guilty about showing that shitty villain his place. Then why did he feel so shitty? Suddenly, a muscular red-headed teen sat across from him. Hey, what's up? Katsuki looked up perplexed. Who the F are you? The kid rubbed his head with a sheet-eating grin on his face. Eijiro Kirishima, I'm in your class. Katsuki snorted. Whatever. The two of them sat in silence for a minute. Why the F are you here? You looked lonely. Kirishima hesitantly responded. Everyone thinks I'm a monster after yesterday, so why the F are you here? Kirishima looked down for a second. Well, I just know what it's like to be down in the dumps after failing. What you did yesterday was very unmanly and terrible. Kirishima looked back up at him with a smile. But the manliest thing a person can do is give someone else a second chance. Katsuki stared at him for a second before snorting. You're naive. Kirishima laughed sheepishly. Maybe, but would you rather sit alone for the rest of lunch? No. Shigaraki sat on his usual bench reading the timetable he had stolen earlier that day. Based on the information in the table, tomorrow would be the best day to attack All Might for the next 2 weeks. A bit sooner than he would have liked, but he would have to make do with what he could get. Suddenly, he saw Izuku walking towards him and quickly hid the timetable in his pocket. He'd deal with the planning later. Hi, Evacuation. The much smaller teen greeted. Shigaraki smiled under his hoodie. Hello, Izuku. Izuku sat down next to him, looking far more excited than usual. What have you been up to, Izuku? You'll never believe it, Evacuation, but after all my hard work and training, I got into the UA Hero course. Isn't that amazing? Shigaraki's grin fell under his hoodie. He knew that Izuku had been applying to you today. He had just been hoping that he would fail the test. That's great, Izuku. He let out through grit teeth. What class did you get into? Please don't say 1A. Hero class 1A. How nice for you, Izuku. Izuku beamed back at him, a stark contrast to the non-stop cautious looks he had received from him just a few months ago. I've also made so many wonderful friends already too, like Uraraka. Shigaraki tuned him out. Izuku, the closest thing to a friend he had ever had, now had friends. If Izuku had friends, he may not want to spend time with him anymore. It was so unfair. He had spent months trying to make friends with Izuku, and then these people came in and became friends with him out of the blue. It made his blood boil. He was the only friend Izuku needed. Arakishig. Shigaraki broke out of his trance and stood up. I'm sorry, I just remembered that my dad needed me to make dinner tonight. See you later, Izuku. He quickly walked away before Izuku could respond. This could not have gone any worse. Not only was his only friend part of the class that would be under attack from his minions tomorrow, but his only friend had also acquired new friends that he may like more than him. He needed to play this to his advantage. He needed to figure out a way to utilize this information. He stopped. That's not a half-bad idea. Shigaraki looked down at the wide array of minions before him and smirked. This would do quite nicely. Hello, my fellow villains, Shigaraki began. It is my pleasure to announce that we will be assaulting a UA field trip tomorrow, with All Might as the chaperone. He let the cheering from the minions die down before continuing. The plan currently is for you guys to deal with the students and other teachers on the trip, while Kurogiri, Nomu, and I will focus on All Might. There was less cheering this time, but it was still a rather positive response. I have a second task for you, however. A bonus objective, if you will. Shigaraki handed a stack of photos to the frontmost villain motioned for him to pass it along. This, my friends, is one of the highest potential hero students in the world right now. Your secondary objective is to capture him alive and bring him to me. Whoever completes this will gain double their current pay. There was a murmur among the crowd as they looked over the photo. One of the stupider villains at the front walked up to him. What happens if we just kill the brat and bring you his corpse? Shigaraki smiled maliciously before grabbing the villain by the face and disintegrating his head off. I'll do that to the person who killed him and their whole squad. Another villain more hesitantly raised his hand. Yes. Why do you want him alive so badly? Shigaraki chuckled as if that was the most obvious thing in the world. Killing All Might will be crushing to hero society. Kidnapping and turning a promising child to villainy would double the impact. Shigaraki smiled down at the photo of Izuku in his palm. Izuku walked towards the gate of the school, before stopping suddenly. He wasn't sure what or why, but something felt off about his surroundings. After a few seconds of glancing at everything around him, Izuku shrugged and walked into the school. It was probably just his imagination. Izuku sat on the bus in between Mineta and Ida. As soon as they had arrived, Aizawa had ordered them to put on their hero costumes and head to the bus for a field trip. Izuku currently was the only one who lacked a complete costume due to the damage it had sustained when he fought against Katsuki. He looked down at his gloves and fingered the detach mechanisms. They were the only salvageable piece of equipment from his fight with Katsuki, with everything else being either unusable or badly damaged. He had opted to just wear his gloves with his uniform. He leaned back in his seat and sighed, trying to fall asleep. Midoria. He groaned and sat up, looking across the aisle at the girl who had just called his name. It took him next to no time at all to recognize the green-haired, frog-like girl from her entry in the database. Tsuyu Azui. Mutant-type quirk, frog, makes her body anatomically similar to a frog. Gives her powers such as hopping long distances, jumping incredibly high, sticking to walls, extending her powerful tongue long distance, secreting toxic sticky liquid and camouflage. Weaknesses: cold environments slow her down significantly and her blunt attitude can accidentally alienate some people. What do you need, Azui? She looked slightly surprised. You know my name? Yes, I made it a habit of learning everyone's name. Her face went back to the same blank expression. It almost reminded him of his father's poker face whenever he played it with him and Mom. Izuku was a little unnerved at just how little her expression changed. Either way, I couldn't stop thinking about your ball throw the other day. There's a question I wanted to ask you about it. Izuku nodded his head cautiously. Frankly, your quirk reminded me of All Might. Izuku didn't let his shock show on his face. He had to stay calm. There was no way she could have figured out about One for All. What are you implying? It just seems strange to me how similar your quirk is to All Might. Izuku forced his face to stay as neutral as possible. Based on what she said, she definitely didn't know about One for All. If he had to guess, she either believed All Might was related to him or that it was just a strange coincidence. Before he could respond, a muscular redhead a few seats down from him piped up. All Might doesn't hurt himself when he uses his quirk. They're significantly different in that way. Izuku glanced over at the redhead, now recognizing him as Eijiro Kirishima. That was too close. He needed to be more prepared in the future for questions such as these. Besides, Kirishima continued, both his quirks are much flashier and more useful than mine. Izuku blushed at the compliment. Personally, Kirishima, I think your quirk is a lot more versatile than my own. Your quirk doesn't break your bones or force you to wear gloves 24/7. Kirishima threw him a smirk at the compliment. Thanks, but you really shouldn't put yourself down like that. Kirishima smiled and threw a smirk over at Katsuki. You want to know who's flashy and strong? Bakugo and Todoroki. Everyone but Kirishima purposely avoided eye contact with Katsuki. They had all purposely avoided him ever since the battle trial. Nobody felt like risking his ire. Izuku glanced at the seething Katsuki. On one hand, he really wanted to help Katsuki. He wasn't the kind of person to hold grudges, and he always felt like he should help those who needed it. Katsuki obviously needed help, but he just shut out everyone around him rather than acknowledging them. On the other hand, Katsuki had been literally trying to kill him. Even worse, he had seemed to enjoy the experience. He hadn't even apologized for his actions, instead choosing to avoid him. What Katsuki did was effed up, and it wasn't his responsibility to help him. Before Izuku could reconcile the two warring halves of his mind, he heard Aizawa pipe up for the first time since they had left. We're here. Wave your hand at me. Shigaraki ordered Nomu. Nomu waved its hand at Shigaraki. Shigaraki smirked at how perfectly Nomu was obeying his commands. With a weapon like this, All Might didn't stand a chance. He heard the familiar sound of a portal opening up behind him. Tamura, it is time for our attack. Shigaraki turned around with a smirk. Nomu, follow me. He and Nomu walked through the portal. Upon exiting the portal, he looked around at all the minions he had gathered. He was still quite surprised at just how many minions he had assembled. He walked up to the front of the room with Nomu and clapped to get everyone's attention. Immediately, every villain in the hideout froze and turned their heads to Tamura and Nomu. Hello, my fellow villains. I would like to introduce you to Nomu, the villain I informed you about. Shigaraki smirked at the distinctly uncomfortable atmosphere the crowd projected. Nomu is a genetically engineered human, designed to hold multiple quirks at once. Currently, he possesses the quirks of shock absorption, regeneration, and super strength. He felt a slight amount of indignation at the doubtful looks the crowd gave him. I see that you doubt my statement. Kurogyari, please pass me the gun. The crowd scrambled to get as far away from his as possible as Kurogyari created a portal next to him and gave him a gun. He inspected it carefully with 4 of his fingers, before turning the safety off and firing the gun straight into Nomu's chest. Nomu's expression didn't change in the slightest as the bullet bounced off of his chest. Shigaraki smirked, disintegrating the gun in his hand before signaling Kurogyari to sever Nomu's arm. Kurogyari formed a portal in front of Nomu. Nomu, stick your arm through the portal. Nomu moved its arm into the portal and resumed its blank staring. Kurogyari closed the portal on Nomu's arm, severing it. Near instantly, Nomu regrew its entire arm. Shigaraki turned back to the shocked villains with a smirk. I believe that should be sufficient enough evidence that I'm not lying. With that, everything should be in order. Does anyone need a demonstration of his strength quirk as well? He held back a laugh as his minions comically shook their heads. Now then, let the carnage begin. Izuku stretched as he got out of the bus with the others. So this was USJ. It was quite a bit larger than he had expected it to be. From where he was standing, he could see a ruins zone, a landslide zone, a mountain zone, a conflagration zone, a flood zone, a downpour zone, and a central plaza. A rather large variety of different environments to practice rescue in. As Izuku was admiring the different zones around him, a person in a space suit walked up next to Aizawa and clapped to get their attention. Izuku turned to look at the person, before freezing in shock. He knew who this was. 13. Emitter-type quirk, black hole, allows the user to create some kind of black hole. They do not appear to be actual black holes, however, since a black hole that is sustained for as long as the ones 13 creates would be extraordinarily dangerous. Weaknesses: very poor combat ability and is unwilling to permanently harm foes. Izuku checked his friends to see how they were reacting and held in a snicker at Ochako's fangirling. Hello everyone, 13 stated aloud. And welcome to USJ. Before we start, I have a few things I wish to say to the students. Aizawa nodded before looking around. Where's All Might? He was supposed to meet us here. 13 glanced over at Aizawa and shook their head, before flashing him 3 fingers. Aizawa sighed and mumbled about irrationality. As some of you know, my quirk is called Black Hole. It can SCK in and tear apart anything. I've used it to save people in all sorts of disasters. However, my quirk could be easily used to kill. I have no doubt that this is true for many among you. Izuku noticed everyone looking discreetly at Katsuki, before looking down at his glove-covered hand. His mother screaming in pain. Katsuki kicking him away in fear. Shinya lashing out to get away from him. Izuku shook his head to regain focus. We live in a society where any random person on the street might have the power to cause natural disasters. That is why quirks are so heavily monitored and restricted nowadays. From Aizawa and All Might, you will learn how to use your quirks to fight others. From me, you will learn how to use your quirks to save others. I hope you leave here today with the understanding that your quirks can be used to help people. Izuku continued staring at his hand, before clenching in determination. He could do this. He can learn how to use his quirk to help others. He looked back up with a smile. Suddenly, he noticed Aizawa looking towards the center of the plaza in alarm. He turned his head and was shocked to see a hand emerge from a portal of black mist. Out of the portal came a skinny young man covered in severed hands. He looked around as numerous figures walked out of the portal. The final one to step out was a massive black figure with an exposed brain and a bird-like beak. Izuku could swear that both the massive figure and the hand-covered man were looking straight at him. The black portal condensed into the form of a man with the same mist that formed the portal for a head. The man covered in hands and the black mist seemed to be discussing something before the man pointed straight at Izuku. Izuku backed up and turned to Aizawa, hoping this was some kind of training exercise. Aizawa was putting on his glasses and preparing his scarves. There was no mistaking it, those were villains. Everyone stay back. 13 Protect the students. One of you, try calling the school. We don't have much time. Izuku realized that he was planning to fight them alone. Sensei, you typically fight against 1 or 2 villains at a time. You could very easily die in a fight against that many villains. Aizawa grimaced before turning with a forced smile towards him. No good hero is a one-trick pony. Before anyone could stop him, Aizawa leaped into the sea of villains. 13 turned to Kaminari. Any luck? Kaminari shook his head. 13 pointed at the exit. Then it's time for us to evacuate the premises. Suddenly, a mass of black mist appeared in front of them. I'm afraid I can't allow that. The mist villain from before's eyes appeared in the black mist in front of them. Greetings, I am Kurogiri of the League of Villains. Forgive my bluntness, but we have come today to murder the symbol of peace, All Might. Izuku felt chills go down his spine. He does not appear to be here today. Do you know if his schedule was revised? Katsuki and Kirishima rushed at the villain's eyes, who avoided their blows lazily. You certainly are dangerous, even as students. Either way, my role remains unchanged. But first, I think I'll be achieving our secondary objective. Izuku felt the ground disappear from under him and fell through Kurogiri's portal. Izuku! Uraraka screamed. One of her friends had seemingly just dropped out of existence. Do not worry for your friend, he has another purpose. The rest of you, however, will be scattered and tormented. Uraraka screamed as she fell through a portal. She looked down, to see that she was falling quickly towards the landslide zone. Thinking fast, she slammed her hands together and reduced her gravity. She landed comfortably on the ground and looked at her surroundings. There was a small group of villains walking towards her menacingly. She couldn't do this. She was just a hero in training. She wasn't red. She stared in shock as Izuku kept going despite his injuries. He should be surrendering or falling unconscious, but he just kept going. It was both inspiring and terrifying just how determined he was to win. She narrowed her eyes at the villains, before picking up a large cluster of rocks and removing their gravity. She threw the rocks at the lead villain, knocking him out with the sheer force of the rocks she had thrown. The villains halted and looked at her in uncertainty. She got into a battle-ready stance and got ready for a fight. Shoto fell through the portal towards the mountain zone. Thinking quickly, he formed a ramp of ice, using it to slow his speed down to a point where he was safe. He looked around, only to notice a large group of villains. One of the front villains straightened up in front of the others. Look at what one of the bosses gave us. You ready to kill him, boys? Shoto froze them solid, leaving only their head unfrozen to breathe. The villains' faces morphed from shock to fear as he walked over to what appeared to be the leading villain of the group and put his hand in the villain's face. You have 60 seconds to tell me your plan or I'll freeze you all solid. Momo fell alongside Ojiro and Hagakure towards the conflagration zone. She quickly formed a metal pole and jammed it into a nearby building, stopping her fall. Looking towards Ojiro, it appears that he had grabbed onto a nearby ledge with his tail. In his hands, he appeared to be holding Toru. She looked down and grimaced at the wide variety of villains beneath her. Thinking fast, she formed multiple flashbangs with her quirk and threw them down towards the villains below. All of the villains below were blinded by the blast. Forming a pair of climbing axes, she scaled down the building to the disoriented villains. She looked upwards to see Ojiro following her lead, with Toru still in his arms. She turned to the villains and knocked out all but one of them with her climbing axes. She held one of the climbing axes to the last villain's throat in an empty threat. You're going to tell me what's going on here. Katsuki found himself falling with Kirishima and Kaminari towards a body of water. He grabbed onto Kirishima and blasted the air clumsily to keep the two of them afloat. Glancing around quickly, he saw a nearby boat and blasted the two of them towards it, landing with a crash on the deck. The two of them groaned as they sat up. Katsuki looked over at Kirishima before turning to look at the water. He felt like he was forgetting something. Suddenly, the water lit up with electricity and multiple injured bodies rose to the surface. In the middle of these injured bodies, Kaminari's form suddenly rose up. Lightning F-. Are you alive? Kaminari moved against the water. We. Kirishima ran up beside him and looked at Kaminari. Come on Bakugu, we have to help him. Do we have to? Kaminari started drooling heavily. Unfortunately. Minoru watched Shiro lead the villains towards the trap they had made. Minoru, Shiro, and Jiro had all landed together in the ruin zone. After escaping a villain group in the area with Shiro's maneuverability, the three of them had come up with a plan to take all the villains down. Shiro used his maneuverability to lure the villains through the ruins. The villains, too distracted by their possible target, didn't notice the purple ball ahead of them until they were trapped on top of them. Mineta leaped out from behind his pillar. Now Jiro! Jiro blasted a pillar supporting the ceiling above the villains, causing it to collapse on top of them. The trapped villains thrashed and squirmed to try and escape the trap to no avail. Mineta walked up to one of the villains with his head free. Now, you will tell me why you're attacking us. Tsuyu leaped from villain to villain, taking them out with quick kicks of her powerful legs. She had landed in the downpour zone alongside Koji and Yuga, but she currently had no idea where either of the two was located. Grimacing, she fled from the villains again. She had been utilizing hit-and-run tactics to take down a few villains at a time before fleeing and repeating the process. Normally, she would be tired from the sheer amount of work she was doing. The water, however, kept heavily revitalizing her. She looked back at the now small group of villains. It wouldn't be much longer before they would all be taken care of. Suddenly, a laser beam shot out of nowhere and took out 2 of the villains instantly. Shortly following that, Koji burst from behind a wall, took out 2 more villains. Utilizing the villains' confusion, Tsuyu jumped backward and took out one of the last 2 villains, before immobilizing the last villain with her tongue. She passed the last villain to Koji, who held him in a bear hug. She walked up to the last villain and smirked. "Now tell me, what is your goal?" Tokoyami took a deep breath and looked around at his determined classmates. 13 had been taken down by Kurogiri, who had simply used a portal when 13 attacked with his black hole to redirect the attack back at him. For their plan, Shoji had agreed to take care of 13 while the others helped Ida escape. Once he received a nod from Ida and Mina, Tokoyami started the plan to let Ida escape by having Dark Shadow attack Kurogiri. Ida and Mina quickly started towards the nearest exit as fast as they could. Kurogiri avoided the Shadow's attacks and tried to move to stop Ida. When he tried to move, however, Dark Shadow grabbed him from behind and threw him to the ground. Disoriented, Kurogiri was held down by Sato as Mina and Ida reached the exit. Mina quickly threw her strongest acid on the door, quickly melting through it. Ida ran through the now open hole in the door as fast as he could. Kurogiri cursed and forced his way out of Sato's grip. He quickly made his way to the exit to try and stop Ida, only to discover that he was already out of sight. Cursing under his breath, he turned to the remaining students and growled. He wasn't supposed to leave until Tamura was done with the second objective. "I need to go inform him about this." "Congratulations, you earned yourselves a few more minutes of life." Kurogiri then teleported to the center plaza, leaving Tokoyami and his classmates to ponder what he said. Aizawa slowly worked his way through the villains, 1 or 2 at a time. Aizawa realized what he was doing was a suicide mission. Izuku was correct in stating that he usually handled up to 1 or 2 villains at a time. While he could certainly handle a few more than that, he was heavily stretching it at over 50. Luckily for him, most of the villains appeared to be either new or incompetent. None of them were big threats. Aizawa glanced towards the man covered in hands in the back, as well as the large abomination next to him. Except for them. He didn't recognize the man, but the abomination was strikingly similar to the villain Octoid he had fought against alongside Crawler, the Hata brothers enhanced by Trigger, and the genetically enhanced Kurihito Kamachi. All of them working together hadn't been able to even damage the thing, so he hoped against hope he was wrong. He turned his attention back to the fight and continued taking down more villains, before suddenly being distracted halfway through taking down another villain by a loud cracking noise. Turning his attention back to the villain leader, he was shocked to see Izuku on the ground in front of him, with the leader leaning over him. He dodged an attack from a nearby villain and went back to taking down more of them. He had to finish this fast. He made a promise and he wasn't about to break it. Izuku fell through the portal and landed on the ground with a loud crack. He hissed and felt his ribs. Nothing appeared to be broken, but it really hurt. He looked up to see the villain covered in severed hands leaning over him. He quickly rolled away from him and got on his feet in a battle-ready stance. The leader continued staring at him unnervingly. "Hello, Izuku." Wait a minute, he recognized that voice. Taking a close look at the villain, he recognized the build and general height. "Oh shit. Arakishig The villain chuckled. "That's not my name and we both know it. With your intelligence, I'm surprised you haven't already figured it out yet." Izuku could barely breathe. What the hell was going on? Wait a second. Araki Shigaraki Tamura. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. Shigaraki Tamura was one of the few known S-class villains in the world. The fact that he hadn't noticed such an obvious anagram made him feel like an idiot. Even some of the most dangerous villain out there like Muscular, Moonfish, and Toxic Chainsaw were only A-class villains. Shigaraki Tamura, on the other hand, was an enigmatic S-class villain with many kills on record. He was considered to be one of the most dangerous villains alive, and he had somehow ended up befriending him. Shigaraki chuckled. It's great to see you again, Izuku. It's too bad that we had to meet again in a location like this. What was he doing? He had to run. He had to get as far away from Shigaraki as he could. I see you're too shocked to say anything. Either way, you'll be coming with me by the end of this. Izuku finally snapped himself out of his stupor and slowly started backing away. He needed to keep him distracted while he got in a good position to run. Why are you doing this, Shigaraki? What's the point in capturing me? Shigaraki laughed as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because we're one and the same. Shigaraki reached up and removed the severed hand covering his face. Izuku froze on the spot. His eyes were just like his. His skin was just as chapped and cracked as his. Even his smile was uncannily similar to his own. Astonishing, isn't it? I was just as shocked as you were when I first saw you on TV after the slime villain incident. I decided to investigate you further afterwards, following you and learning your schedule. Finally, I found the best time to meet you and created a scenario where your curiosity would force you to talk to me. That was originally all I wanted to do until you showed me something incredibly interesting. Shigaraki pulled out a pencil, nearly identical to the one Izuku had disintegrated when he showed him his quirk. Shigaraki put all of his fingers on it, decaying it to dust. Izuku felt nauseous. When you showed me your quirk a few months back, that's when I knew that we were one and the same, that you were just like me. Izuku flinched at those words. He was looking at his literal worst nightmare, someone just like him who didn't reject their quirk, and instead used it for villainy. Shigaraki didn't notice the crisis he was having and continued on. Originally all I cared about was your quirk, but over our interactions, something interesting happened. Something that made you far more valuable to me. We became friends. Shigaraki reached out a hand. Which is why I want you to join me. To become the newest member of the League of Villains. To become stronger than you could ever imagine. To get revenge on all the people who hurt you because of your quirk. Izuku shook himself a bit to regain focus and gripped his fist in determination. No. Shigaraki looked surprised at his answer. Why not? Izuku looked up with determination in his eyes. I know who you are, Shigaraki Tamura. I know all about the numerous people you've killed for your own selfish goals. I refuse to become a person like you. Shigaraki pouted like a child. Can we at least still be friends? What? Hell no. Shigaraki sighed sadly. Was hoping it didn't have to come to this. Shigaraki cracked his neck back and forth. I guess I'll just have to force you to join. In an instant, Shigaraki covered the entire length of the distance between them. Izuku dodged the fast strike from Shigaraki. Shigaraki's speed was inhumanly fast. He had never seen anyone without a speed quirk move as fast as he just did. Izuku threw a punch towards Shigaraki's midsection, which was easily avoided by the much larger villain. This was insane. How was he this fast? Shigaraki threw a punch into Izuku's face, knocking him onto the ground with ease. You're not bad, Izuku, but your lack of experience shows. Izuku gritted his teeth and tried to push himself up, only to find that the ground he was pushing against turned to dust. Losing his balance, it gave Shigaraki more than enough time to pin him on the ground with his elbow and knees. Izuku struggled against him, only to find that Shigaraki was much stronger than him. I set some traps with my quirk beforehand in case you decided not to join me. You aren't using your quirk, Izuku, and that's a massive advantage for me. I've trained on the many ways to use my quirk, while it seems your applications of it are pitiful. Izuku flinched at the assessment. Shigaraki was right, he had avoided learning more about his quirk and how to use it in a fight. He was so scared of injuring others that he was actively handicapping himself. Izuku was out of options. The only way out of this was to use his quirk. Izuku quickly detached his gloves and disintegrated more of the ground beneath the two of them to give himself more room to struggle. He then struggled harder than before, moving his hands all about in an attempt to get Shigaraki off of him. In his struggle, he accidentally grabbed Shigaraki's arm. Both of them looked down at where he was gripping his arm. Nothing had happened. They both sat there in shock for a minute, before Shigaraki laughed and gripped Izuku's arm back. Nothing happened. Shigaraki looked Izuku dead in the eye. Don't you see? This proves it. Our quirks are so similar that we can't even hurt each other with them. We are truly one and the same. Despite how disturbed Izuku felt at Shigaraki's words, he used Shigaraki's momentary distraction to push him off himself and roll over to the side. To check that his quirk was still working, Izuku slammed his fingers into a nearby clump of grass. It turned to dust like it normally did. Izuku got up feeling a bit more disturbed. If their quirks didn't work on one another, then they would have to be nearly identical genetically. When one considered just how similar the two of them looked as well, the chance that they weren't closely related were astronomical. While he was still reeling from this information, Shigaraki renewed his offensive against him, landing 3 powerful hits on his torso. Izuku groaned and tried to get up, only for Shigaraki to throw dust in his eyes. He hissed in pain and clutched his eyes. While he was distracted, he felt another hard blow to his face, making him feel like he was on the verge of unconsciousness. He was a fool to think he was ready to go up against an S-class villain like Shigaraki. He wasn't ready for this at all. He had to use his last resort if he wanted to get out of this alive. Wiping the dust out of his eyes, he threw one last-ditch punch with one for all towards Shigaraki. Dust billowed up and he couldn't see what had happened. As the dust cleared up, he realized 2 things. The first was that his arm was completely fine. He hadn't broken it with his punch. The second was that his fist was currently pressed against the abs of the black abomination he had seen earlier. The abomination looked down at him with its dead eyes, seemingly not even caring about the massive hit it had just taken to its stomach. He heard Shigaraki laughing from behind the abomination. Thanks, Nomu. I probably wouldn't have reacted to that in time. Now immobilize him. Be careful to avoid putting him in a position where he could touch you with his hands. Izuku struggled as the abomination lifted him into a position where he couldn't move his arms. He struggled to try and touch him with his hands, but couldn't seem to do it. Nomu turned him around to face the now curious-looking Shigaraki. How amazing! How truly astonishing! You, Izuku Midoria, have 2 quirks. I can't wait to show this to Sensei. Izuku's heart stopped. Izuku, his mom started. There's one thing I want you to remember no matter what. 8-year-old Izuku looked up in curiosity at his mother. If a villain ever refers to a sensei or is referred to as sensei, I need you to run as far away as you can. Izuku pet his head in confusion. Why? That's the name All for One makes his followers call him. Shigaraki looked at him in confusion. How do you know Sensei's villain name? No matter, I'll be bringing you to him soon enough. So that's why Shigaraki befriended him. To deliver him to All for One. Izuku struggled and thrashed than he ever had to no avail. Please Shigaraki, if you ever considered the 2 of us friends, don't take me to All for One. He'll kill me. Shigaraki looked at him in confusion. What are you talking about? I'm sure Sensei will love you, just like he loves me. Shigaraki pulled back a fist. I'll show you when you wake up. Shigaraki punched him hard in the face, and everything went black. Shigaraki staring in confusion at the unconscious child in Nomu's arms. Why would he believe that Sensei would want to kill him? Sensei was the kindest man he knew. He would surely love a new addition to their family. He heard Kurogiri teleporting behind him and turned to him. Ah, Kurogiri. I was just finishing up here. You can go ahead and take the kid back to base. I'm done with him for now. We can handle him when we get back to base. Suddenly, Shigaraki felt a presence next to him. Dodging to the side, he avoided a powerful kick from Eraserhead. Nice move, Eraserhead. You truly are an impressive hero. He motioned with his hand towards Nomu. But not impressive enough. Nomu dropped Izuku's unconscious body carefully, before quickly slamming Eraserhead into the ground by his leg. Eraserhead screamed in pain as Nomu thrashed him around like a rag doll. Nomu, stop. Nomu stopped thrashing him and dropped him on the ground. Shigaraki walked up to the badly messed up Eraserhead and smiled down at him. What were you hoping to accomplish with that move? Kurogiri, Nomu, and I are far stronger than the small fry you just took. With how tired you are, surely you knew that you wouldn't even be a challenge. Eraserhead was clearly struggling to breathe. I made a pure promise to protect Kiki Kid, Eraserhead forced out. And I'm not about to be break it no now. Shigaraki chuckled. How impressive and noble. I'm nearly willing to keep you alive. Shigaraki moved to rest his hand over Eraserhead's chest. Nearly. I am here. Shigaraki jumped up and noticed All Might now standing at the entrance to USA. What? He shouldn't have arrived here this quickly. Kurogyri, what's going on? As I was about to tell you before Eraserhead interrupted, one of the children escaped early due to their teamwork. I was unable to stop his escape. Shigaraki grit his teeth. Demonite all too hell. Kurogyri, teleport Izuku back to base before he reaches US. Shigaraki turned towards where Izuku's body was, only to find it missing. He turned his head back to the entrance to see a black bird-like creature speedily carrying Izuku back to the entrance. He grit his teeth in frustration. Kurogyri, stop them. Oh no you don't. Out of nowhere, a blonde kid with grenade gauntlets appeared and landed on top of Kurogyri. As Kurogyri tried to get up, the blonde put his hands over Kurogyri's neck. Earlier when I attacked you, you moved out of the way of my attack and said I was dangerous. You wouldn't have said that unless I was a threat. That means that there is something for me to blast beneath your mist. Kurogyri stilled and stopped moving, understanding the implication. Shigaraki turned back to Eraserhead, intent on making him a hostage, only to find that his body was seemingly floating away. Listening closer, he could hear footsteps in time with the body that was floating away. Dimming it all, how did things shift so heavily from his favor in a few seconds? He looked around and cursed. He didn't have many options left. Nomu distract All Might. I'll rescue Kurogyri. He turned and dashed at the brat standing over Kurogyri. The brat looked up at him with a sneering face and aimed his gauntlet at him, before faltering when he saw his face. Taking advantage of the lapse in concentration, he easily knocked the brat off of Kurogyri, who near immediately teleported them a few hundred feet away. Shigaraki looked back at All Might, who was currently fighting with all his might against Nomu. Kurogyri, try and teleport my hand into All Might's weak point. Kurogyri created a portal that Shigaraki stuck his hand through, almost to immediately have it forced out. DMN. His punches are too strong. The shockwaves are too DMN powerful to get past. He needed Nomu to immobilize him, but looking at their fight he wouldn't be able to anytime soon. He needed to get All Might off balance. He needed to make him falter enough for him to land attack. It's no use All Might. Nomu is designed to beat you. No matter how much you push yourself to the limit, he'll just keep fighting. All Might didn't even flinch at those words. He's designed to test my every limit, you say? Then I guess I'll just have to go beyond my every limit. I guess I'll have to go beyond. All Might tore off Nomu's arms. Plus, All Might punched Nomu as hard as he could in the chest. Ultra! Nomu went flying, breaking straight through the dome. Shigaraki stared at where his greatest weapon had just flown out of the dome. He had no other option now. He needed to leave. He distantly heard All Might talking about his villainy and evil in the background, but he didn't care. He turned his eyes to Izuku's still unconscious body at the entrance, laying still right next to a bird-headed teenager. He wouldn't be leaving without at least one prize. Kurogyri, give me a portal to Izuku. Kurogyri created a portal in front of Shigaraki. Shigaraki smirked and desperately grabbed through the portal. All might be weakened, but it was unlikely they could beat him without Nomu or any other distractions. Izuku, on the other hand, was a surprisingly open target. His hand was millimeters away. He heard a loud bang and felt a sharp pain go through his hand. Hissing, he fell backward and let Kurogyri teleport them back to base. His vengeance and Izuku would have to wait for another day. Inko dropped the phone when the teacher on the other end informed her of an attack on the students during a field trip. Quickly changing outfits, she moved towards the door to head to the school. Suddenly, the door opened in front of her without warning. Thinking quickly, she pulled a hidden knife towards her before kicking down the intruder, pinning them to the floor, and placing a blade on their neck. She looked at the intruder's face, and her jaw nearly dropped. Faster than she could process, the blade was forced out of her hand, She was forced onto her back, and the intruder pinned her against the floor. Hisashi looked down at his wife and smiled. "Hey honey, I'm home." Hisashi held in a snicker as he looked down at his wife's shocked face. He knew he probably shouldn't have withheld the information from her, but her face right now was hilarious. "Hi Hisashi." Hisashi smirked and released his hold on her arms. "Yes, my dear." Inko smashed her fist into his face and knocked him off of her. "You son of a bitch. I'm going to kill you for scaring me like that." Hisashi quickly got up and dodged the numerous hits his wife threw at him. "Honey, don't you think you're overreacting just a little bit?" "No." Hisashi sighed and grabbed her next hit before pinning her against the wall. "Calm down. I'm sorry for not alerting you ahead of time of my arrival. It was short-sighted of me and I didn't think you would react this badly." Inko relaxed in his grip. "No, I'm sorry. The door just swung open and I got scared because of Dash." Inko froze. "Sheet. Hisashi, we need to leave now." Hisashi looked down in confusion at his wife. "But did something happen?" Izuku and his classmates were attacked during a field trip by a large group of villains. Hisashi let go of his wife. He quickly checked his hidden knives to make sure they were ready in case of an emergency. He looked back towards her and motioned towards the door. "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Hisashi looked down at his unconscious son and growled in anger. How dare anyone touch his precious son? He had a hard enough life already and didn't deserve to be hurt like this. He suddenly felt a pat on his side and turned to see a brown-haired girl pointing to her mouth. He held his hand up to his mouth and realized that smoke was billowing out of. That hadn't happened in years. He thought that he had gotten rid of that habit. He quickly willed it to stop and nodded at the girl in thanks. She smiled in return and walked over to sit with a group of teenagers that had been sitting in the corner of the room since before they arrived. It was made up of the girl, a bird-headed teen, a large teen with glasses, and a very short teen with purple ball with hair. They appeared to be his son's friends. He would need to remember to have a talk with them later, to make sure they weren't planning anything uncouth with his son. He looked over to his crying wife next to him and wrapped an arm around her. Making her cry was another reason he had for incinerating the person who did this. He noticed Recovery Girl walking up to them. "So, how is he doing?" Recovery Girl sighed and motioned at Izuku. Multiple broken ribs, a broken nose, and a stress fracture on his left arm. Overall, he's in pretty bad shape, but there's nothing life-threatening as of now. Hisashi let out a sigh of relief. "Will you be able to fix the damage?" Recovery Girl nodded. "As soon as he wakes up, I'll take care of most of the damage. Whoever gave him these injuries went to great care to make them temporary." Hisashi filed away that last bit of info for later. He'd ask for information about the attack later when he was visiting his asset. Recovery Girl made a motion to get his attention. "By the way, Nizu requested your presence in his office." Hisashi sat next to Inko outside of the rat's room. He grimaced. Nizu's quirk not only gave him the intelligence and partial body structure of a human but the lifespan of one as well. Nizu had just become principal back when he started his first year in UA. He wasn't particularly looking forward to talking to him again. He heard the ding indicating that the two of them could enter the office. He looked over uncomfortably at his wife, who seemed to be sharing the same feelings as him. They walked into the office. Nizu sat behind his desk, smiling towards them and motioned towards the chairs across from him. Hisashi sat down with Inko and met the rat's gaze. The two stared at each other for a few seconds, before the rat broke the gaze and looked towards Inko. "Welcome back, Hisashi and Inko. I see your doi dash. Get to the point, Nizu." Nizu frowned. "What? A principal can't just call his two former students to his office to say hello." Hisashi gave him a disbelieving look. Nizu sighed. "I want to discuss what you wish to do with Izuku following this recent breach in our security." Inko leaned forward. "I want to remove him from UA." Hisashi turned to his wife in alarm. "Don't be so hasty now, honey." Inko gave him an annoyed glare. "You heard what the nurse said. Whoever was attacking him went to great care not to cause him permanent injury, meaning that they probably knew who he was." Hisashi grimaced. He had been hoping that she hadn't heard that little detail. It would make convincing her so much easier. I know what that means just as much as you do, Inko, but you need to think about this logically. Inko growled in anger. What logic is there to think about? We need to move as far away as possible. All for One has to have noticed Izuku if they were attacked, and UA has shown they can't handle an attack from him. Hisashi considered his next move. And what would moving away accomplish? All for One has contacts all over the world, and he would surely be able to follow us no matter where we went. Inko started to interject before Hisashi held up his hand to silence her. What's more, would we have handled an attack of this caliber any better? We're both great fighters, but the sheer number of villains from what I've been told was far larger than what we could have handled. Nizu snapped his fingers to get their attention. If I may interject, they also had 2 S-class villains, one of which was strong enough to hold his own against All Might, and a high B-class villain with a warping quirk. There were also only 2 teachers there to defend the children until All Might go there. Inko looked a bit more convinced now. Look, honey. The attack was a well-planned one with multiple villains, both high and low class, during a time where there were fewer security measures in place to defend Izuku. It wasn't the fault of you. Inko looked down in defeat. But how can we trust them to keep Izuku safe? The villains had someone with a warping quirk. What's to stop them from warping Izuku away in the middle of class? Hisashi patted her on the back and wrapped an arm around her. I think my boss may be able to help with that. Inko leaned into his one-armed hug. Nizu cleared his throat. I'm glad we were able to solve that issue quickly. May I please talk to Hisashi alone though? Inko looked up at him with a questioning look. Hisashi gave her a smile and motioned his head towards the door. Go ahead. This won't take long. Inko reluctantly got up and walked out of the room. Hisashi turned his head back towards Nizu. I have a pretty good idea of what you want to talk to me about, so make it quick. I'm disappointed in you, Hisashi. Hisashi snorted. You wouldn't be the first person to tell me that. Hisashi felt a bit uncomfortable as Nizu stared at him harder with his beady eyes. I can't technically do anything to legally prosecute you for what you've been doing due to your pardon by the UN, but I can still tell you that what you're doing is wrong. Hisashi rolled his eyes. Really? It seems that I've done more good for the world in my current position than when I was a hero. Nizu pet his head in curiosity. Why did you quit being a hero anyway? Hisashi leaned back. I realized that I wasn't doing as much good as I thought I would be doing. I realized that most heroes are just arrogant assholes who care less about the civilians they're saving and more about their ratings. I realized that there were other avenues available to me that would do more good for the world than being an arrogant, uncaring piece of shit. And I'm sure that revelation had nothing to do with Enji Todoroki. Hisashi's face hardened before he got up out of his chair. We're done here. Nizu smiled sadly. I guess we are. Uraraka stared at Izuku in guilt. She had been completely useless at USJ. While she had managed to beat the small group of villains at USJ that attacked her, she had done nothing to help anyone. Tokoyami, Hagakure, even Enji Bakugo had done more to help others at USJ than she had. She felt tears stream down her face. Why was she so useless? Why was she nothing more than a leech on people better than her? Her parents and friends would be better off without her. She felt a pat on her back and turned to see Ida giving her a comforting look. Are you okay? She looked down in guilt. No. Ida pursed his lips in thought. Do you want to talk about it? Uraraka sat there for a second. No. Ida sighed and leaned back on the chair. Uraraka turned her eyes back to Izuku. She needed to get better. She needed to get stronger. She needed to be an amazing heroine who could save everyone around her. Izuku felt groggy as he drifted back into consciousness. He looked down and realized that he was in a hospital bed. That's strange. He looked at his hands and saw that his gloves were on. That was odd. He thought he had detached the... Suddenly, it all came back to him. Arakishigmurtoa was Shigaraki Tamura. He had fought him, and he had been effortlessly beaten into unconsciousness. He struggled and tried to force himself out of his bed. Shigaraki had beaten him, meaning he must have taken him back to All for One. He was forced down into the bed by a large hand. No, he refused to die like this. Izuku, calm down. Wait, that voice was familiar. He looked to his side to see that his father was the one holding him down. Calm yourself, Izuku. You're safe. Izuku finally calmed his breathing and fell back onto the bed. What happened? His father ruffled his hair affectionately. You were beaten in your fight against Shigaraki and fell unconscious. Luckily, your classmates and All Might were able to rescue you. Shigaraki and a few of his associates were able to escape. Izuku looked up in panic. If he escaped, then he's going to come back for me. He's going to capture me and bring me tea-dash. His father covered his mouth to stop his ramblings. Do you really think I'm going to let him do something like that? I didn't kill his, but if he tried. His father looked so cold and serious, which was a stark contrast to his normally playful personality. Besides, there are countermeasures to warp quirks like his misty associate. I'll be communicating with some people who can set them up later. Izuku calmed himself at his father's words. He trusted him to be telling the truth. Izuku heard a creak and turned towards the door, where Inko was currently walking in. She stopped briefly when she saw that he was awake, before practically slamming into the side of his bed and wrapping him in a hug. Izuku, my baby boy. I'm so glad you're all right. I was so scared when I heard what happened. Izuku felt surprised at the amount of affection his mom was giving him. I'm glad that I'm fine too, Mom. I'm sorry for scaring you so bad. His mother smiled down at him before tears welled up in her eyes. She laid her head down on his shoulder. I love you, Izuku. I know I don't tell you it enough. I'm so sorry. Izuku wrapped his arm around his mother, wincing in pain as he did so. I love you too, Mom. Hisashi coughed to regain their attention. I wanted to know if there's anything else you need to ask me before I call Recovery Girl in here to heal your wounds. Izuku sat in thought for a second, before suddenly panicking. Wait, what about my classmates, 13-sensei, and Aizawa-sensei? Are they all right? Apparently, none of your classmates were injured during the attack besides a few scratches and bruises, but both 13 and Eraserhead are in the hospital. Both of them are projected to live. Hisashi chuckled. Speaking of your classmates, a few of them stayed around for quite a while to make sure that you were okay. They all had to go home though due to how late it is. They care a lot about you. Hisashi smirked evilly. I'll make sure to talk to them later. Izuku didn't know whether to laugh or shiver. Either way, is there anything else? Izuku sat in thought for a moment. Shigaraki grinned down at him. You aren't using your quirk, Izuku, and that's a massive advantage for me. I've trained on the many ways to use my quirk, while it seems your applications of it are pitiful. What Shigaraki said was right. He hadn't been using his quirk to its fullest potential so far, effectively handicapping himself. He needed to improve and learn how to use it. Can you call All Might for me? There's something I'd like to discuss with him before you call in Recovery Girl. Hisashi and Inko exchanged glances before Hisashi got up and walked out of the room. A few minutes later, his father returned with All Might in his buff form. I am here, young Midoriya. All Might was clearly struggling to maintain his form. His smile was quivering and he was sweating hard. All Might walked over and sat down next to Inko, who immediately scooted her chair away from him. After throwing her a look of confusion, All Might turned back to Izuku. What is it you need? Izuku stared at him. I can wait if now's a bad time. All Might's smile became even more strained. What are you talking about? I'm feeling perfectly fine. Inko rolled her eyes. Shut up, Yagi. All Might's eyes widened in surprise and he suddenly deflated back into his emaciated form in a burst of steam. Hisashi and Inko stared at his emaciated body before Hisashi started laughing. I can't believe it. This is so stupid. Inko silenced him with a glare. How did you get like this, Yagi? All Might finally shook himself out of his shock. How do you know my name? Inko rolled her eyes. Please. I know that I didn't contact my mother many times before her death, but I was able to convince her to tell me why she had abandoned me. She told me all about you and One for All. It didn't take much effort to connect the dots when a mysterious new hero named All Might popped up onto the scene. Inko glared at him. By the way, I really don't appreciate that you gave my son your quirk without my permission. Izuku and All Might stared at her in shock. Inko rolled her eyes. Oh please. Did you really think I wasn't going to investigate my son when he left every day at the exact same time to go and do something he refused to talk about? When I saw you on the beach training him, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. All Might leaned back. Please don't surprise me again. I'm not as young as I used to be, and I don't want to die of a heart attack just yet. No promises. All Might groaned before pulling up his shirt to reveal his injury. I sustained this injury in my fight against All for 5 years ago. I was hoping that he had died from his injuries, but the Nomu creature Shigaraki had with him all but confirmed that he's still alive. Inko and Hisashi exchanged worried glances. Hisashi walked closer to All Might and took a closer look at his injury. DMN, that's a really serious injury. I honestly have no idea how you're still alive right now. All Might flinched and quickly turned towards Izuku. Revelations aside, what is it you needed, young Midoriya? That was incredibly suspicious. 2 things. First, I want to start integrating my quirk into my fighting style, and I was wondering if you could contact anyone to help out with that. I need some kind of gloves or gauntlets that can quickly move off and onto my pointer and ring fingers. I would talk to the support department, but I feel that my request might be a bit too difficult for them. All Might sat in thought. I know a person or two who can help out with making something like this, but what changed your mind about using your quirk? Izuku looked down at his glove-covered hand and clenched his fist. I've been actively using my quirk as a last resort. During my fight against Shigaraki, I realized that I was making myself weaker by refusing to use it. Izuku grimaced. Whether I like it or not, Shigaraki showed me a few ways that I can use my quirk outside of killing people with it. What does Shigaraki have to do with this? Shigaraki reached up and removed the severed hand covering his face. Izuku froze on the spot. His eyes were just like his. His skin was just as chapped and cracked as his. Even his smile was uncannily similar to his own. Izuku shook himself out of his memory. That was the second thing I wanted to talk to you about. Before we fought, Shigaraki removed his mask and I got a good look at his face. It was uncanny just how similar he looked to me. On top of that, I got a good look at his quirk. It was identical to mine. Hisashi, Inko, and All Might all froze in shock. On top of that, when we touched each other with all 5 fingers, neither of our quirks activated. Our bodies were literally immune to each other's quirk. Hisashi frowned. Which means your quirks would need to be nearly identical genetically, which would be nearly impossible if you weren't related. Add that on top of your similar appearance, and the chances of you two not being related are astronomically small. Inko closed her eyes in thought. There's only one person I can think of who fits Shigaraki's profile and age, but he's supposed to be dead. Inko opened her eyes and turned to All Might. Do you think you could get me in contact with a police officer to point them in the right direction? All Might nodded. I know just the guy. All Might turned to Izuku. Is that all? Izuku nodded. All Might smiled and patted him on the head. Then I guess we'll see you when you wake up. Hisashi checked his surroundings to make sure he was alone. Satisfied with his survey of the surrounding area, he pulled out his phone and dialed his boss. He heard the click indicating that his boss had answered. Jaldabaoth speaking. He groaned at his boss's stupid codename. Boss, it's me Hisashi. There's a favor I want to ask of you. He heard a glass being set down in the background. Ah, Hisashi. I was just about to call you to check on your progress. Inform me of that, then I'll consider your little favor. His boss sounded like he was in a good mood. I haven't been able to start yet due to my son being injured in a villain attack during a field trip. I was planning to start later tonight. I presume your son was the student injured in the UA attack then. Like father like son. That's a good enough excuse on why you haven't started yet, I guess. I would like to inform you, however, that Doll has already completed your previous assignment. Great, now he was taunting him. I don't care. The big problem here is that the main villain behind the attack was specifically trying to capture him. You know what that most likely means. He heard his boss humming in thought. So, All for One is specifically targeting your son. It's quite odd that he would target him during a field trip of all things. It doesn't quite fit with his previous kidnappings. I'll look into it. What's the favor you need from me? Hisashi took a deep breath. I was wondering if you could ask someone to set up warp quirk countermeasures around my son. Hisashi held his breath. That's a very expensive favor, Hisashi. They're seldom used outside of prisons for a reason. All for One doesn't just target people for no reason though. If he's after your son, then I don't want to know why. I'll grant your request, but it'll be coming out of your paycheck. Hisashi let out his breath. Thanks. He heard his boss chuckling. Oh, I'm sorry, did the great Hisashi just thank someone? Hisashi promptly hung up. He sighed and flipped through his contacts. He knew what he had to do now. His finger clicked on Enji Todoroki's contact. He waited for a second as the phone rang. What do you want, Hisashi? Hisashi growled a bit under his breath. What, are you not even going to say hello to an old friend? He heard a loud thud. Don't play games with me, Hisashi. What do you want? Hisashi frowned. This was not going near as good as he had hoped. I want you to meet me for lunch at that restaurant we both used to love going to with Inko on Friday nights. Enji remained silent for a few seconds. When? Hisashi smiled. How about next Wednesday? Fine. Hisashi was promptly hung up on. Hisashi put his phone in his pocket and sighed. That could have gone a lot better. He checked that his knives were in their holsters. He had something else he needed to complete tonight. Katsuki stared at the ceiling in silence. He knew it was way too late and that he should be asleep, but he couldn't help but be bothered by the day's events. The villain leader was running quickly towards him. Katsuki grinned. Whatever, it didn't matter how strong the villain was, he would beat him all the same. He aimed his gauntlet at the approaching figure, who made no moves to dodge. Then he got a good look at the figure's face. It was uncannily similar to the shitty Deku. He remembered the look of fear on Deku's face as he came at him. He remembered the pain on Deku's face after a fierce beating. He remembered all the times he had beaten Deku into SBMSN and called him a villain to try and make him fight back. Katsuki faltered. The villain easily knocked him aside and disappeared. Katsuki shook himself out of his memory. How could that villain be so similar in appearance to Deku? Were they related? Was he a clone? Was his face the effect of a quirk? Did it even matter? Katsuki sighed and turned over onto his side. He just asked Deku in a few days. Katsuki closed eyes and fell asleep. Shigaraki watched as the water in the glass he was drinking swirled around. He had been sitting there for quite a while thinking about the mission. In retrospect, many of his decisions were quite foolish. First, was his decision to try and complete 2 objectives at once. If he hadn't have tried to deal with both objectives, he would have had a much higher chance of success with the objective he chose. He could have then dealt with the other objective at a later date. His second mistake was his complete lack of regard for many factors that dampened him during the mission. He had completely forgotten about the shockwaves that Nomu and All Might's fight would create, the same shockwaves that prevented him from landing a killing blow. Third, was his utter disregard for the students. He didn't do enough to prevent them from interfering with his plans. He had severely underestimated them, and that had led to him losing Izuku, losing Eraserhead as a hostage, and being very nearly captured himself due to Kurogiri being taken out by the blonde. His final mistake was the use of such weak common thugs as minions. Most of the minions he had hired were weak common thugs who weren't strong or skilled enough to be considered a full-on villain. This was shown in how easily they were dispatched by Eraserhead and the hero students. In the future, he would need much stronger allies for his league. Besides his failures, there was one other thing that bothered him. Izuku's reaction to hearing about Sensei was so strange. He had seemed absolutely terrified of the idea and had fought so hard to avoid capture. It was so odd to him. Why would anyone be scared of Sensei? Sensei was the kind person who helped him when no one else would. Sensei had cared for him immensely ever since the day he took him in. Sensei was in every sense amazing. But then why was Izuku so scared of the name? Shigaraki considered the thought for a minute. The most likely explanation was hero propaganda, teaching him about the evil of villains and how terrible they were. Since Sensei was the top of all villains, Izuku must have thought that he was the king of evil. Yeah, that had to be it. There was no way that sensei was anything but amazing. Shigaraki finished his glass of water and turned on his game console. He'd worry about that later. For now, he would just try to relax. Hisashi stood on the roof of the base of operations for his informant. Hisashi looked down at his mask and groaned for what felt like the 1,000th time at its stupid design. It was a blue and yellow devil mask with a large smile plastered on the front. His boss forced everyone in his division to wear it to meetings to conceal their identities. It also recorded everything he saw, which his boss could later observe for suspicious activity. Wearing the thing wouldn't be a problem if the design wasn't so stupidly intricate and impractical for combat. He forced the thing over his face while mumbling under his breath. He'd just remove it quickly if things went wrong. He checked his body to make sure his knives were in place, before pulling his sword out of the sheath on his back and checking it one last time. The edge was just as sharp as he remembered, so he should be fine. He put the sword back in its sheath and jumped over the edge. The two guards on the outside panicked as he leaped down in front of him. They pulled out their weapons and aimed them at him. "Take me to your boss." The code word is dragon. The two goons stopped and looked at each other before moving aside and letting him pass by them. "Continue down straight to the end of the hall. Turn left and he will be in the 4th door on the right. He's expecting you, so just walk right in." Hisashi nodded in appreciation and walked through the base to the location. He stood outside the door and took a breath before walking inside. Inside, there were 3 men that he could see at a surface glance. Looking around, he could see a few more who were most likely there in case things went south. He turned his attention to the 3 men directly in front of him. On his left was a man in a white raincoat of average build. He didn't appear that threatening until you looked at his mask. A black plague doctor's mask with gold trim, the staple of Shai Hasaikai. From what Hisashi remembered, his went by chronostasis. On his right, a very large, muscular man with long light-colored hair. He wasn't wearing a shirt and he had a pair of leather straps attaching metal to his knuckles. His plague doctor mask was very leathery in appearance and looked tattered and unkempt. From what Hisashi remembered, he went by Rappa. Directly in front of him was an average-sized man in black suit and tie covered in a green jacket with sleeves that end at the forearm and a collar decorated with a lot of purple furs. His most striking features, however, were his white doctor's gloves and the red and yellow plague doctor mask that covered the bottom half of his face. The two of them stared each other down for a few minutes, neither wanting to back down first. Eventually, Hisashi laughed and made his body seem more relaxed. "Hello, Overhaul, it's been a while."